members outside.
Yes, we have a quorum there outside.
Good morning, honorable members. May I invite honorable members who are still actually having tea outside to please come back so that we may start. Honorable members, in the interest of time, I think we need just to start, and I hope that we do have the quorum.
Yes, Chair.
Now that Honorable Boshoff has walked in, we are now comfortable to start. Good morning, honorable members, and good morning, DG, DDG, and your team. Would like to hand over to the secretary of the committee to actually inform us whether there are any apologies.
Good morning, members. Good morning, DG and the DDG and the team. Good morning, colleagues. We have an apology from Honorable Lucas and Honorable Nana, and the apology also from the minister. If he is able to come, he is requesting to leave around 10:30. He has a cabinet meeting. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you. I hope that every member has an agenda. Can we actually have a look at the agenda and have it adopted? Honorable Adams.
Thank you, Chairperson, and good morning to all in the room. I move for the adoption of the agenda. Thank you.
Thank you. Any seconder? Honorable.
Good morning, Chair. I second the move.
Thank you. I just want to apologize to honorable members that I will be wearing my mask because I have a bout of flu. It's not COVID, please. It's thank you. Well, we have invited the department together with the agricultural land holding to actually brief us on the agricultural holding account. And without any further ado, I would just want to hand over to the Director-General and to give us that presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Honorable Chair and honorable members of the Portfolio Committee on Land Reform and Rural Development. We have got a team today from the Department of Agriculture, Land Reform and Rural Development to give a presentation around the agricultural land holding account as requested by the Portfolio Committee. Chair, we would firstly want to apologize because of the versions that we had lodged with the Parliament, pending the areas that were highlighted by Parliament that they needed additional information on, and therefore we just had to adjust the presentation accordingly in terms of the request that was there. The presentation that we'll do today will be outlining the areas that of contestation that we have within ALHA, with specific reference in terms of the portfolio itself and how over the years it has been performing, and ultimately how then it impacts in terms of the work that is being done within the Department of Agriculture, Land Reform and Rural Development. ALHA in its form has been there for a number of years and has been responsible for a number of interventions that the department had, especially around land that was acquired by the department, and including quite a few aspects in terms of the different areas of work. I see the team is getting itself very, very ready in terms of presentation. Our presentation today will be led by Mayor Mokete Mukono, who is the acting CFO within the department, but also in terms of her responsibility, primary responsibilities, has been responsible for ALHA in the department. We will also make sure that as soon as we go around, we also introduce the team that is here with us. Thank you very much, Honorable Chair.
Thank you.
Thank you, DG. Good morning, Chair. Good morning, honorable members. I'll be taking you through the brief on ALA. The SDG has indicated the presentation would is structured in such a way that it then gives a brief and details with regard to issues within the ALA, Agricultural Land Holding account. In terms of the background, ALA is a trading entity, meaning that it is operating within the department. It is not set up in such a way that it's an independent entity. The DG is still accountable for the entity, and the DDGs within the branches also perform some of the functions within ALA. It was established through an Amendment Act of Provision of Land Assistance Act of 1993. That was done in 2008. And the reason for the Act to be amended to include ALA was to basically manage this portfolio in such a way that we can then be reporting separately, differently from how the departments are reporting. So what ALA is currently dealing with is procuring land, primarily is agricultural land. Then there's allocation of land to identified beneficiaries, and the ALA provides technical and financial assistance to beneficiaries. Through, initially we had a recap program, and currently now we're implementing what we call Land Development Support Program. So within the entity, there is different programs, and as I indicated, our priorities are land acquisition and land development support. Mainly on land acquisition, we acquire strategically located land, and we then identify beneficiaries and we lease it out. There's also land development support, as I indicated, it then substituted the recapitalization and development program. There's a whole lot of property management, and there's also financial support. So if you look at the plus model, what happens is that the model indicated that department will acquire land, it will lease the land out, allocate it and lease it out, and then develop the land for transfer to beneficiaries. And this also links up with what is sitting in what is in the NDP chapter 6. So I'm going to just on the third quarter, this is the roughly what we non-performance information in terms of targets. We're measuring our targets on two. The APP of ALA is reported in the department as one APP of the department. We measure land acquired, leased out, and also land development support. And in terms of the statistics here, in terms of the acquisition of land, in the third quarter, we had achieved about 12,461 hectares that we've bought out of a target of 17.9 for 17,000 hectares, which makes 70%. And then land development, we're supporting 14 projects. You'll see that the numbers here are very low, and in the presentation will indicate what becomes the challenge with regard to ALA. We thought of also just showing the portfolio as requested, the position of ALA, financial position of ALA. ALA currently sits with total net assets of total assets of 16.5 billion, which is our net asset. And if you look at our biggest item in our balance sheet is property, plant and equipment. We've got about 5,181 property portfolio that are managed in ALA. This property portfolio is growing marginally, and the growth rate, why it's growing marginally, is because also the impact on the land acquisition targets that we're bringing in, as well as the issue around transfers of land. The initial ALA strategy was saying that the department is not necessarily supposed to be holding this land perpetually. So the plan was to bring in, acquire, develop, lease out, and when the producer is capable now to manage this land, then we'll transfer it out. So hence now we've not necessarily moved towards the end of transferring some of these properties, hence you see the portfolio growing. This portfolio, 5,181, we did a farm assessment previously where we assessed the capability of this property, and the capability came with a result that says we acquired very good commercial properties. So these are big commercial properties that we've acquired. So hence the aim is to ensure that we turn them out into commercial entities. Hence the land development support policy was revised and brought in. The potential for this property could bring more or less 60,000 permanent jobs in terms of that assessment into the market, and it can also bring about 2.5 or so billion in terms of income into the market. So that is the biggest portfolio. And then if you look at the other assets that you've seen under current assets in the portfolio, we've got cash and cash equivalent of 806 million. This is at the third quarter. And you've got trade and other receivable exchange. And on that one, we're sitting with a debt book of about 820 million. And majority of the debt book is being impaired. As you're seeing that the debt book, we're currently projecting 94 million. That is because the bulk of that debt has been impaired in our books due to the lease challenges and collection challenges that I will indicate. Then you'll see that we've got what we call trade and non-exchange, trade and other receivable and non-exchange of the 842 million they projected them. This is basically where we are supporting farmers. This is an asset when we with land development support. So what the model is there is that we partner with community organizations, we partner with banks, we then open what we call a grant holding accounts. We then transfer the grant funding into the grant holding accounts where the funds are co-managed by the bank as well as the community partners as well as the farmer. So the balance of 842 million there, what we're projecting is what is at the end of the third quarter was not yet spent by the farmers. So the project, when we started, I think we're sitting at about close to 1.5 billion transfers that we've made into this grant holding account, and that is what is remaining as the balance. So far in the third quarter, we had managed to touch about 278 beneficiaries, where we're now turning out these properties for purpose of commercialization. So the other area that I would want to indicate on the balance sheet is around the other provision. If you look at this, about 580 million. This is the rates and taxes provision, which we owe to municipalities. We estimate we owe to municipalities. We're currently having challenges with municipalities with regard to their billing system, because most of the time the statements that they give us don't reconcile, and sometimes they also don't even bill us on time. So that's a challenge that we currently having. We are making a little bit of a dent with regard to reducing this provision, but ultimately would want to reduce this provision. So that is our balance sheet. In terms of our cash flow, as I indicated, we're sitting with 806 million closing bank balance. And that 806 million, if you look at rates and taxes provision alone, 580 million, you'll then realize that Allah actually doesn't have a lot of money for the mandate that it's supposed to do. So it is highly underfunded, this entity. If you look at the cash flow, if you look at the grant income, as a third quarter, we had received 641 million from the department. We do some collection, lease collection. We had a target of 33 million collection. We collected 44 million over target by 11.9 million. This is a new trend. It's showing positivity with regard to collection. However, as I indicated, that there's still a huge debt book in this area. We also, you'll see that we've got land development support, decommitments, and other deposits that we get. So what we do is with the model of land development support, learning from what RECAP brought in, we do a contract management and project management where farmers are unable to keep up with ensuring that they produce on the land. Breach are then invoked on the contract, and in such, there are cases where then contract gets to be terminated and the money gets to be refunded back by the bank, because the agreement with the bank is that, and the farmer is that if you don't use it the way it's supposed to use it, we can then invoke breach, get to a termination, and return the money. The bank will return the money from us without any legal processes. So that's why you'll see that there's 14.4 billion, and other deposits will be around interest and so forth. So we had revenue of 770 million. We spent land development support around 165 million, 95% targeted progress in the third quarter. And then you'll see that we've got property payments of rates and taxes that we spend about 108 million. It's a steady improvements from where we come from, but obviously would want to ensure that municipalities do bill us correctly and we pay them on time. And we'll do other payments that relates to water rights, and this is instances where farmers are given land that have got a high potential with regard to production, planting, and so forth. And they do farms that have got water rights. They're supposed to be paying for those water rights, the usages, but in some instances, and most instances actually, these farmers are not complying. Therefore, in that case, because we are the landowner, we have to get in and pay those charges and then recover that money from beneficiaries, which is currently a big of a challenge, and it's also affecting the land transfer program. There's water, electricity connections, and so forth, and repairs that we do. And also just to qualify the repairs, also there's certain, from a policy point of view, certain repairs that the beneficiaries or the lessees are supposed to handle in the farms. And there's certain ones that the department needs to then handle. And under capital expenses, what we have is the land acquisition. If you look at land acquisition, third quarter budget was 222 million, which as I indicated, it's not a lot, looking at the mandate that ALA has. And we spend around 194 million, which makes 87%. There's other capital expenses that we do around our other systems, where the project monitoring system as well as our financial system, those are the costs there. So we just also indicated roughly, just also to just indicate province-wise, how we're looking in terms of distributing the budget, also looking at the third quarter. If you look at the biggest budget currently in the third quarter, went to Northwest, and Mpumalanga in terms of budget, as well as KZN. And these are the areas where we've got a lot of properties, plus properties. The Western Cape is one that does not have a lot of properties in our portfolio. So if you look at the expenditure there, you would see that Mpumalanga is also doing well in terms of spending. Northwest, Western Cape, as well as Free State in terms of spending the budget. Third quarter already, they had dented the fourth quarter targets in terms of their budget, because this is just their third quarter budget. So in terms of the financial performance, this is just where now we are only looking at from the cash flow only expenses that relates to the 23-24 financially. And if you look at our annual performance, if you look at the grant income budget is sitting at 180, 155. So the next slide will basically indicate how the budget has been, the grant funding has been declining in ALA over the years, to get to a point where we're now sitting at 855 for the whole year. And this budget is supposed to be dealing with land acquisition, it's supposed to be dealing with property management, it's supposed to be doing with land development support, with a portfolio of over 5,000, which is huge. We're seeing also donation received. As I indicated, we did farm assessment. When we did farm assessment on ALA properties, we also did a diagnostic report where we're analyzing the performance of ALA. And in the report, one of the recommendation was to also look at the policy instruments and policy environment. And one of the policies that was introduced was also the donation policy, and also the beneficiary selection policy that was also developed. But what we're seeing currently is now that when we're buying land, if you look at the donation received after non-exchange revenue, when we're buying land, we're seeing that a lot of former owners are donating their assets. Some assets are not being sold, so they will donate to the state to say, here's this and that when we're acquiring property. So we're starting to see a bit of an increase there. Hence, you see that 320% and that over variance. The rental income is projected at 89.9 million. We can ask at a portfolio of 14 billion, and if we look at property alone, it's about 12 billion. The revenue income projection billing is a bit low, and that is because of the challenges that we're also having with regard to leasing, which I'll touch on the next slide. Hence you'll see that ALA, as I indicated, we're operating at a budget of 1.1 billion, and looking at the work that ALA needs to do, 1.1 billion, it's not necessarily enough. We're looking at the expenses. These expenses, as I said, is just basically period costs, meaning that expenses that we need to pay in that particular financial year. And of interest is, if you look at the LDS budget for the year is 388 million. So with a portfolio property of 5,000, beneficiaries of about 2,000 or so, that budget is not enough. Then you've got the second biggest is the property payments, and this property payments relates to, as I indicated, rates and taxes and so forth. So you'll see that every year we need to incur about 210 million to maintain and pay for statutory related costs like your rates and taxes, your water rights in cases of defaults and so forth. Hence we're saying this, the challenge with the budget that we have. So the next slide is just to indicate where we come from with regard to the budget. So you'll see that the budget started around 2007, very low, and it got to a bit where we got to the billion marks. And to a point where, if you look at 2021, the budget of ALA was about 448 million, and which now there is a steady increase again for this budget. And if you see now, as we're sitting at 855, the budget would have a marginal increase moving forth. Next year would get about 900 million of the budget. So you'd see that this budget, ALA has been having a lot of budget cuts over the years, which also is hampering the performance. So the next slide would look at land acquisition as a whole, and this is where we house the 5,000 properties that we currently have, which, by the way, increases every time we buy property. As I indicated, we'll be adding about 388 million in the portfolio. So the next slide, DDG Ndobe did present to you the last time we were here. This is around the policy around land acquisition, the instruments that have been used over the years. We started with LRAD. We then moved from LRAD. We started with SLAC. We moved to LRAD, and also there were challenges around if you take large groups and then you group them together and then you give them funding and they needed to co-fund also, then it created a lot of conflicts that the model did not necessarily work that well. It was then moved. There was also 2000 Land Summit resolution around the issues of willing buyer, willing seller, which was the system at the time to proactively buying land, so meaning proactively going to them and looking for land that would be able to serve land redistribution, then strategically acquiring that land, and then acquiring warehousing, developing that land, and then ultimately we needed to then transfer this land. So if you look at the land acquisition history, we've been seeing also, again, as I indicated, the decline in the budget then affected the decline in the space. So what has happened is that over the years we've been acquiring properties, and these properties were not yielding much in terms of development. So farmers would get a property, it's an asset, it's not doing, it's underutilized and so forth. And the department went and took a decision to then introduce a system where it can then assist farmers to be able to farm, because just giving them land alone, it was not yielding any fruitful results. And then that meant that the land acquisition budget needed to be cut to be able to allow other areas to come in. So there were new programs that were introduced in the department. There was the rural development program that was introduced in the department. There was RECAP that took 25% of the budget that was introduced. Then now it's replaced with land development support. There was SRR that was also introduced, which we have discontinued. RECAP and SRR program has been discontinued. SRR was also one of the farms. It was also expensive program because it would buy a very big commercial farm for the purpose of ensuring that labor tenants and farm dwellers are also then having farms that they could also own and have shares in. So all these things that came in also affected the decline in budgets and the rate at which the entity acquired land. So if you look at this slide 13, we're just showing the land, the targets that we've had. So if you look at versus the budget, if you look at when ALA started in 2000, it was promulgated in 2008, and if you look at from 9 and 10, the land that was in the system, if you look at it now, where we are, we're sitting with the 355 million that I indicated that we have to slice from the 800 million or so grant that we're getting from the department. So you'll see that steady decline to an extent that we had a target of over 600 and 910 of our hectares that were acquired, to now where we're targeting about 35,000 hectares of land in the system. So that is the impact of the budget decline that we're having in the space. As I indicated, the strategy is acquire, allocate, develop, and transfer. The strategy meant that government would then warehouse this property while training and developing producers or farmers for them to be able to then take up the land and deal and manage the land themselves. So what is currently happening is we're doing long-term leases of 30 years with a renewable clause of another 20 years. This moves from the initial strategy. The initial strategy was that we will acquire, we'll hold the land for 5 years while we're developing, and then release the land. And what has happened over the years is that the farmers that were in the system were unable to rapidly get to manage this commercial big farms. So it was not possible to do this transformation in 5 years, especially taking the huge acquisition, that drive that we did in that particular financial year, which also impeded on also farmers getting into the financial market, because that is a short-term lease that is not sustainable, and it's not an instrument that you can use to get funding from banks. So that's why then a move to a 30-year lease with renewable of 20 years. As we're speaking, we're warehousing roughly about 2.5 million, around 2.4 point something million hectares in the portfolio, the 5,000 that I've indicated. And then the lease agreement, or the approach that we had, was that once we develop, you now are sustainable and you can run the farm. You can then have got an option to purchase this land, and you have to purchase it at market value, because that would be aligned to treasury regulations. Current approach now, we are implementing the state land and transfer project, where we're disposing this agricultural land with certain conditions that Mr. Chilote will indicate also later. So in terms of the land acquisition, I've indicated that one of the things that we did around 2018, 17, 18, 19 was to look at the performance of this portfolio and look at the institutional arrangement of ALA. Through the, we contracted GTEC to look at analyzing the institutional arrangement of ALA and how ALA is performing, and why such properties, these properties, farmers are not able to then reach the commercial status that we would like them to do. And one of the issues that came very strongly was the type of farmers that we got into the farms. You need to get farmers that there to farm, not people that want to hold land for speculation, that one day I will get this land free, or for any other reason that is not aligned to the purpose why we've got land redistribution. So in 2020, then the beneficiary selection and land acquisition allocation policy was then approved, that then also looks at providing land to beneficiaries, so that there's new things that were introduced that we advertise the land. They need to be evaluation, so that we can check that we're getting right farmers. It also brought in another piece of element that is very important, that it allows for land acquisition for various uses. So initially, ALA was acquiring, we were carrying agricultural land. So this policy then says, no, there's land, you can allocate it for other various uses. The farm assessment that we did also indicated that there are certain farms that we've got that are not conducive for agricultural purpose, for production purpose, maybe because the land, the soil, there's erosion and so forth and so forth. And some you've got conflicts, some are neighboring communities that would then render agricultural commercial purpose very difficult. And hence this policy now, with it allowing for other various uses of lands, it means that those kind of land will be evaluated, and then look at how best then to be repurposed. It then excludes public servants and a public representative. It allows for cooling period of 12 months for public servants and 24 months for public servants officials. So if you from your public servant, you can then not allowed to be given this land. So with regard to property management, as I indicated, we're dealing with about 2.5 million. The actual hectares is about 2.451 million hectares. We're currently sitting with about 76.8% active contracts. 23% have got no contracts. We've got about 2.6% that is in progress. 0.7%, these are the contracts that there's people on the ground, but the contract would have expired, and then we're working on renewal processes. And then there's this 486 million 486 million hectares with no contract activity. This 19.8%, I've indicated that around close to 80% of our farms are commercial farms. The remaining 83%, the remaining 17%, the farm assessment report indicated that you would not render a very successful commercial agricultural purpose for various reasons. And some of them is disputes, there's conflicts, there's neighboring townships. You find that farmers get in, they abandon, you try to get another one. So there are various reasons why this group of hectares, 19.8% of hectares, we're currently struggling to finalize. As I indicated, with the beneficiary selection policy, indicating that there's another use of land, that particular property portfolios would be looked at in terms of how to move forth with it in some instances where really. So there's continuous analysis of this property. You'll see that where we then move and progress, it will then move to the 2.6 million, or it then will change status to it being in progress of signing a lease. We're sitting with about 1.8 active contracts in the portfolio, and the 17,000 hectares translate to about 67 contracts that we're currently working on. This is just a dashboard that would indicate the property portfolio at a particular period. The next one is just now to break down, to give the portfolio members the breakdown of this portfolio, the 2.4 million hectares, and what has been leased. If you look at, as I indicated, you've got Northern Cape, you've got Mpumalanga, Western Cape, and KZN, and Free State. These are the areas where a lot of properties are sitting, plus properties. As I indicated, you've got the lesser one, your Gauteng, as well as your Western Cape. Gauteng, we limited also in terms of space, the number of properties that we're buying there, it's not necessarily a lot. Northern Cape, also what we're seeing is that it's because it's big farms, the land is vast, so we're buying a lot of hectares in Northern Cape. So even if we will translate, you find that the beneficiaries are a bit lower, but when it comes to the hectares of land, we've got majority there. Then I'll move to this performance of this portfolio with regard to collection. If you look at, we just projected collection trends from in the debt book from 2018 and 19, and if you look at the graph, it's steadily increasing. But if you on the first one, the big graph there, this is the debt book. It's steadily increasing. So if you look at in 18 and 19, the debt book was a bit low. So what had happened is that 2013 there was a policy that was introduced where we gave farmers want to call it a payment holiday of some sort, that National Treasury granted us not to bill them for a particular period of time, so that we can then contribute to them building the sustainable commercial enterprise, because they are beneficiaries that, they are PDIs, and that we then don't burden them with the lease prospects, and that we'll then build them later. So you'll see that when we then, the policy, when the period that were granted by Treasury expired, we then started to bill these farmers, and the majority of the billing started around 2018 and 19. So that is when then the 5 years period expired. And you'll see that what has then happened from that point of view is that a lot of farmers are struggling to pay the leases to a point where we're currently sitting at about 820 million debt book. And if you look at the lower graph there, is what we are collecting. So ideally this graph should intertwine so that whatever we bill, we should be collecting. So this is also depicting the revenue collection. If you look at 8-year period from 2010 to 2018, we collected about 61 billion. You'd see that the collection was not good. And then from there, we steadily are increasing, sitting at about the 40-something million mark collection currently. So in totality, since Plus started, we collected about 208 million within the portfolio. There are a number of challenges, as I indicated, in this portfolio. The refusal to pay rent, the capacity constraints, because the idea here is that we need to do a lot of enforcement and monitoring. There's issues of vandalism, lack of maintenance. There's also issues of land invasion. Some of those properties that I said cannot be leased is because some of them would have been invaded. And there's protracted legal action with regard to eviction. Just to evict these farmers, we'll give back and forth to try legally, so to try to evict them. There's issues of illegal subletting. There are non-productive farms which they are non-viable for non-agriculture, but there's also farms that are good commercial farms that are not productive, currently damaged, poor, vandalized infrastructure, as well as the so all these challenges, if you look at it, the holding of this plus also created an unintended consequence of ownership. So there's also this challenge that now you've got extended administration issues that you need to deal with, but then the budget is declining. So that's currently creating a lot of challenge. There's the solutions that we've got there. One of them, the last one there, is the issue of the transfer project. So that transfer project plays a very critical role because it's going to ease the burden on the administrative part of ALA. But also it contributing because it then land that are for farm dwellers, labor tenants are then given free title, they are getting out of the system, and now we're introducing also category 3 that are getting out of the system. So when the new properties gets in, then others get out. So it create a portfolio that will be manageable with the size of capacity that it has, and it will then move us forth. So that is one thing that we also looking at. So if you look at the revenue improvement plan, we're currently sitting at 66% of fully implemented and then 4 partially implemented. I'm going to just touch on what the Auditors-General would have said, and they've presented also before you, Chair, and the committee. There are 5 main areas that are challenges in ALA. One is the property management issues. These are issues relating to abandoned farm, underutilized farms that have not been allocated, the challenges that I've been indicating. And there, the action is to enforce. So as I said, capacity to enforce, to strengthen, and also to ensure that we support. If you look at, we're currently building a revenue enhancement strategy in the department, and one of the issues that is very clear is that property management needs to be enforced, but also needs to be balanced with producer capacitation, because you need your farmers to also be capacitated to be able to run this farm. At the same time, you also need to ensure that you enforce the contracts where people are not doing what they're supposed to do. We've got areas around asset management. This is administrative issues like your barcodes that would fall off and so forth. Then we've got issues around revenue management. How do we then increase the collection? As I indicated, that we've got the debt, we're currently drafting the revenue enhancement strategy, and we've assessed the debt book. We looked at the debt book and we will determine what is recoverable and what is not recoverable, looking at what is currently happening in the farms. There's also findings that quality of financial statements, there would have been some errors of mapping and so forth, which we've fully implemented. Then the other big finding that ALA has currently is around the recap issue, where we currently sitting at recoverability assessment, as well as some instances would have to declare fruitless and wasteful expenditure. I'm going to touch it in this slide so that I can then give a background of this challenge of the material irregularity in ALA. So we had what we call a recap and funding, recapitalization and development program funding, which was given to farmers. We had about around 620 or so farmers that were supported through recap. The model was that farmers would then be advanced funding. They'll be given a tranches fund in advance, and they need to use that money in line with the business plan. So they are not allowed to deviate without coming to the department to ask for a request to deviate. So what has happened is that the policy will then say the department would have to now, once they submit these invoices and proof of evidence that they use this money in accordance to the business plan, they will submit to the department. Department will evaluate through a reconciliation, and then will then accept. What is not accepted must then be returned back to the department. We've had a number of changes in that space. The initial policy was not clear in terms of the recoverability, in terms of, so it gave us a remedial action in terms of breach, where you need to go to court, and then we later change the contract to allow that if at the end of the production cycle or termination of the contract, we reconcile and we find that there is still money that you have not either used or you've not used it in accordance to the business plan, you must return to the department. Now the challenge came with farmers not submitting documents, evidence to the department. We then did a project. We've been doing monitoring over the years, and then we then did a project assessment or project report where we went to all farms and to determine what actually happened. We did verification of the assets. We then looked at the operational status of these farms, what is happening. And with that, also as part of the motivation from AG side, they then declared material irregularity to say that department should have acted or should act very strongly against these farmers where there's been breach and recover this money. So that is why the material irregularity was issued around 3 years ago. So the department had action plans to deal with this material irregularity. We issued letters to farmers to account. We then assessed the responses of the letters claiming for specific performance and letters of demand that we've issued. When we do this assessment, we're getting different. When we give farmers letters, we've got farmers that cooperate, gives us this information, we go back and we reconcile. You've got farmers that disputes and say, I've used the money accordingly. We have to review that dispute and see whether that dispute is valid or not. And then you've got farmers that plainly don't respond. They don't respond, they then keep quiet. So we then do this assessment. So we'll assess the reconciliations they've given us, and then we'll then determine what we accept, what we decline, and what they need to pay back. And then we issue them with letters of demand and debt arrangements. And those that are cooperating, they do sign those debt arrangement form, and then they start to pay. Those that are refusing, unfortunately, the two elements that the department is doing. We're going for forensic investigation in some instances where we suspect fraud and corruption. And the second part is we're going for legal part, fully fledged legal process with these farmers. If they're not coming to order, to party in terms of dealing with this, then we issue summons, and then there's also an element of consequence management where we're dealing with this area. Consequence management would be in cases where now we then ascertain that we could have prevented this loss should certain officials in the department have done their work the way they should have done. We should have avoided this loss, and then consequence management will then kick in. So this is the status of the material irregularity. This was reported by AG in 2023, and this is what is kind of where we are now. When we started, the financial loss was sitting at around 530 million. And when we closed, and I'm going to concentrate in 24-25, we had referred about 245.9 million for legal assessment. This is where we're now assessing from a legal point of view whether to pursue full-fledged legal case, issue summons. And there are areas that we also look at with legal assessment, the recoverability point of view. Will they be able to recover? Do they have enough assets? As I indicated, some of our farmers, even within the recap field, their farms are not operational. So we're dealing with the legal case. And this, we're dealing it from both the lease side as well as the recap side. Because even in a lease side, you'll find that these farmers would have breached lease condition, is not paying rental, is not even planting, and so forth, and it's been given recap on top of it. So then we're dealing with it from that side to then consequence around termination of the lease agreement, and also consequence around the recovery through a legal assessment tool. This legal assessment and the legal action is the one that is taking a bit longer, because our legal offices obviously would need to ensure that the money is recoverable. We've got about 21.9 million that is under recovery. These are all the farmers that have accepted and they are paying. So they've signed and said, I'll pay this much every month or on a yearly basis. And from those farmers already, we had recovered 7 million. So meaning total of 28 million was those that have accepted to pay back. Then in the process, we received 131 million worth of invoices and evidence that they did spend the money accordingly, which the department accepted. And 9.1 million has been, summons have been issued. And this 19.4 million, they've got letter of demand. They're still within the 30-day period for them to respond whether they then would accept or they dispute or whatever response would get. And then we've got 38.4 million that we've already declared fruitless. The 38.4 million were declared fruitless because when you look at, these are mainly deceased farmers. So these farmers would have been deceased, and when you look at their estate does not have enough for us to recover from. There's no potential of us receiving this, and what we would have done is would have assessed whether giving this money to these farmers and not acting out in time made it to be fruitless. So it does not necessarily mean that the entire recap advance to farmers is fruitless. What it means is where we declare fruitless is where now we can recover, but then we then assess, should we have acted on time or should we have done this and this would have prevented? If there is no case of not taking reasonable care, then that is a normal loss. So, but in these cases, the assessment came that we ought to have prevented that at least these farmers, before they pass on, they would have then paid off this money. So in general, Chair, with regard to ALA, the biggest issue that we have is we're competing with dwindling budget, low resources in terms of capacity, around managing this portfolio, and that also have a big impact in terms of what it then is bringing to the table. The next presentation would be on the progress on the state land transfer, which I'll quickly just run through. This project, there was an IMC that approved this proposal of transferring land, agricultural state land, to currently cease. They then we had to then do an amendment to our state land and lease disposal policy to allow to give this provision of transferring of land, not necessarily at market value. There'd been some discussions with National Treasury with regard to the Treasury regulations around the market value and also the use of the rental income that we derive or that we charge for this program. Hence, the beneficiaries or the lessees must pay their rental on time. So if this program, when it gets accelerated, it means that the 820 billion or so that we owe in terms of lease revenue would be recouped, and it will then be channeled into the system to at least assist in acquiring. So the project in itself is also aiming to address the challenges that I've indicated above. The approvals, this project started in 2024. There was a roadshow by the former minister, where we then we held with all 9 provinces. There'd been, as I indicated, some discussions with National Treasury around the Treasury regulation. To date, there are 219 projects that have been approved. That 34 of them now are ready. They are ready for approval now in 2025. And from the 34, 22 of them have been concluded, and 199 are at different stage of conveyancing. The next slide just indicate the approval per province, and also the current hectares that from the 2.4 million hectares that I talked about, the hectares that will then be released out of the books. They make about 177 hectares. Which will then benefit around 22 beneficiaries. And on the transferred slide, the 9.4 million, the 9,474 hectares already been transferred out. You'd look at Free State, it becomes the one that is moving faster with regard to both approvals and transfers. And then Northwest is running, Northwest and Eastern Cape are running closely behind in terms of approving this project. So the approval is rigorous because we then have to look at, have you not breached the contract throughout the year? We don't want to give farms to people that will not farm. There's certain things like are they farming where they are currently, this project, these farms, so that we don't transfer land and it remains fallow and becomes a challenge. So the approval is very rigorous in terms of ensuring that we then do give people that will use this land accordingly. The number of challenges in the space, one being rates and taxes. I've indicated the rates and taxes as part of the challenge that we're currently having with the provisions that's sitting around 580 million over the years. That also delays this project because now these offers would not, or conveyances will not lodge any property that doesn't have a rates clearance. There's been some continuous engagement with municipal managers and CFOs by provinces to deal with these delays. This again, it will also impact that huge rate, provision rates that I've indicated that we've got a challenge. So it is one of those projects that will assist. Capacity of the state attorney. The initial approach that will then submit all this to state attorney office to then run these transfers for us. We had to relook at the slow pace and then introduce a panel of conveyancers within the department, and so that we can then also introduce private conveyancers to deal with this matter. There's also challenges, as I indicated, that farmers have to meet certain requirements. And one of those is you are paying your dues, your water use charges, which is a big challenge. A number of water use associations are starting to come up to the department saying, we want this money. If you have not paid those dues, you're not qualifying. And also we'll look at issues around recap, any developmental fund that you have not used accordingly. Also, you're not dealing with. With this one, we will be embarking on a drive through the minister. Minister will be embarking on a drive to just publicize this and give title to those that received title, so that we're hoping that it will also indicate to other beneficiaries or lessees the importance of then managing this contract accordingly. Just lastly, Chair, in closing, this portfolio is huge. And as much as I've presented that there are a number of challenges in the portfolio, we do have good projects. We do have pockets of areas where the strategy does work the way it was intended to work. We'll give a farmer a farm. The farmer will start to produce and will develop. And you look at land development support, you'd have, when you started with farmers that you start at, you support them to plant around 100 or 200 hectares of land. You get to the 3 years or 4 years. In 4 years, they are planting around 900 hectares. And they are paying the dues immediately when they get into commercialization. They are paying their rental, and the full cycle is then met. But there are those that really there's challenges. Capacity of producers, the type of producers that we have, and also the budget that is not enough to really go. That is empowering the strategy as a whole. With that, Chair, thank you so much.
Thank you. I was hoping that you would actually hand over back to the DG.
We hand over to you, DG. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Chair. Earlier on, I thought that we will also make an introduction of the colleagues who are here, so that honorable members can be able to address the colleagues as the questions arise. We have gotten that this is Nyamandi, who's next to the CFO, who's responsible for this portfolio at this moment. At the back, we have gotten that Ral CB fellow, who's very known in this committee. And then next to him, we have gotten that Shilote, who's responsible for property management in the department. Across him, we have got within a portfolio that runs with the land development support, Ndate Mashapu, he's responsible for that portfolio. And we have got Mayor Alicia Stevens, who's also here from the office of the DG. And next to me is Mr. Ndove, who needs no introduction to the committee. Chair, that's the, I forgot I saw him moving out, I didn't see him coming back. We have got the Chief of Staff in Ministry, and Daditaba, who's sitting over and sitting in this discussion. What we also have, Chair, it's a lot of figures, but basically the essence was also to show to you the financial performance in terms of ALHA as an institution and its standing at this moment, so that we can have a full-out discussion in terms of the areas that have been highlighted. We therefore submit, Chair, from a departmental point of view.
Well, thank you, DG. I would now invite comments and questions from honorable members, if any. Okay. Can you please keep your hands up so that I can take your names here? Virtually everybody wants to question. Okay. Then may I start off with Honorable Matigizela?
Thank you, Chair. Let me welcome the report and greet the DDG and the team. CFO, I'll just have a few quick questions. I'll start with the last part, the audit improvement plan. Forgive me for disorganizing you. I mean, surely the failure to perform recons at the end of that production cycle is really a serious omission. Now, if you talk about consequence management, I would like to know who were the responsible officials who were supposed to do this and what happened to them. Because one needs to see that those who have really omitted such a serious step, which would have ensured that we don't lose this money, are really taken to task. And whether the department has acted against these people. Well, just to comment on the presentation in general, because also following on that, one is to see that there are measures that have been put in place so that you avoid something like that happening. When you were presenting the performance of different provinces in terms of their grant performance, I would want to understand, CFO, whether, because you can see it's well and good to have spent, you know, your grant, some are in over 100%, but have they spent their grants in line with the predetermined objectives? Because once you see whether the issue of irregular and wasteful expenditure is now, you know, being avoided, because spending is one thing, but whether you are spending in line with your predetermined objectives is another. And just the last 2 points, Chair. The 2.5 million hectares, I mean, as you were presenting, one could see that they are slightly less, of course, of 2.5 million hectares of, at a cost of 14.6 billion. I see the emphasis on hectares and projects, but do you have an idea, because I think we need to quantify this, do you have an idea of how many people really benefited, you know, from this? Because we're talking about people. And one would like to really put a figure in terms of people who have benefited. And the last point for me, Chair, is that the issue of the mandate of this entity vis-a-vis the budget that you are receiving. Now, the budget is declining, obviously we can see. But the big question for me is whether, in all these years, if you look at the overall performance, are we getting value for money? Now, what is the status of all these projects or farms where this money has been spent on? Are you able to tell us that the 14.6 billion rand that has been spent over the years has really resulted in making impact in the lives of those people? The farms are productive and the quality of living for these people has improved. Thank you, Chair.
Well, thank you, Honorable Matikizela, and perhaps one would also appreciate an unpacking of this concept of a productive farm. You know, what do you mean? What is your yardstick to measure a productive farm? How do you measure that the farm is actually indeed productive? Honorable Adams.
Thank you, Chair, and good morning to yourself, your staff, and the department. DG, who is leading the team. Let me also welcome the presentation. Chairperson, my question will be mostly on the revenue collection. There are significant variation in collection rates between years across various provinces. How is the department planning to run the situation around? And while it is appreciated that there has been an increase in debt collection from 2019 and 20, the department should indicate the total amount of accumulated debt to see whether the increase in debt collection is making a significant dent on the accumulation debt. And then, Chairperson, the department should also indicate measures that it is going to do for farmers that are not in a position to pay off their debt. And the department has intervention measures to address challenges to improve debt collection. There are no details of how these measures have been implemented since March 2024 or are going to be implemented going forward. Then, Chairperson, there is no information about how farmers have been contacted or going to contact to encourage them to pay lease rental. It is not indicated how the capacity of the department of the entity has been or going to be strengthened to improve the capacity of state land administration. And then, Chairperson, on the recommendation on improvement of collection and contracted enforcement capacity seem insufficient without strong improvement of constitutional system and control. What safeguards is the department putting in place to improve the situation? And then on the presentation on page 31, the last bullet there is transfer in 22 projects have been concluded thus far, whilst other 199 are at different stages of conveyancy. My question, Chair, how far from finalization of this 199? And on page 32, I'm from the Northern Cape, that's why I have interest on the Northern Cape issue. The breakdown, number of approved is 7, and then the approved hectares is 33.189. Now my question will be on transfer to beneficiaries. Any reason why did the province not transfer to beneficiaries? I thank you, Chair.
Honorable Ndalana.
No, thanks, Honorable Chair and the DG, and good morning to everybody. And let me also welcome the presentation made by the department. I think mine is that, remember last year when we met to consider the AG's annual report and about their uncounted funds under the recap programs. And in slide 25, I think I want the department to explain why it takes 6 months to have a legal services to assess recoverability report. And then in slide 27, the question is that how many letters or forms were issued and debt arrangement forms were issued to those people, and also what is the response and how many summons have been issued for recovery. The last one is that what is the vision of the land distribution? Is there a clear goal and target? NDP target, how is the South Africa performing against that target? Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Honorable Nyambotso.
Greetings, Chair, and greetings to fellow portfolio committee members. Greetings to the DG, the DDG, senior officials, and representative of the minister. Mine is a depressing one because I had an opportunity to go and do oversight on the portfolio committee on agriculture. So then this report is giving me a clear picture of what I saw on the ground versus what is the report here, which is dovetailing, and I will then expose the fault lines in the whole process. One, Department of Land Reform and Agriculture are sitting together, but there is a gray area of sharing of information between these two departments in terms of performance. What should be happening at the Department of Agriculture through ALA dispersing funds to agricultural projects? You should be sitting with first-hand information in terms of high-end commercial farmers, emerging farmers, and black farmers. But the manner in which you are operating both as department, you operate as if you are ignorant of how the industry of agriculture is run, wherein it is privately run by highly commercial and farmers who are syndicates across the value chain of agriculture. They collude on finance, they collude on land, they collude on markets, they collude on export, on everything to thwart any plan to allow any new entrants into the space. So you have that information as both departments. But when you now helping the emerging farmers, you're helping them as if you are ignorant of what is happening out there. And then when you fail to achieve result, it is blamed on obvious mediocre performance, which is unexpected because you are privy to the entire value chain of the industry. So that is one. Two, I'm fascinated about who are these farmers who are selling this land which we are buying? Why? What I saw in the oversight is that any good farming land, the good farmers, they hold on to it. But the one that is being sold, what we saw is that it has defaults. There are problems in there which are hidden. When evaluation of those farms is done, it is a lie. They lie to you, the department, those farmers who are selling, and then you pick up the problems, the faults, later when the new occupant of a farm moves into the farm. They pick up that the evaluation was actually ballooned, the figures, the performance of the farm. Everything that you said it was good about the farm was a lie. So evaluation, why is that? The syndicates who do evaluation of farm is a racial group of whites, and least of them are black, and their interest is very clear. And then you say, I saw the debt book increasing, yet Allah is a business wing of the department. My understanding is that you would run Allah on market values. So which means there is no giving away of money, there is no usage of property without intention to make profit out of it because you are mandated to make profit. But you are losing even when you are sitting as a business. Something is wrong there. Another question, during COVID, because it's blamed, this debt increase is blamed on COVID. Did you follow on the Solidarity Fund, which was issued, pulled for exactly sustaining farms that were already producing, that had employed people so that they don't close down. Why? Because there was money set aside. I'm raising that question because on the newspaper report, it came out that 75% of Solidarity Fund, which was issued, was spent to high-end commercial farmers by the banks which you gave that money to disperse. So it never went into the emerging, your black farmers. In fact, they got a lesser percentage of that. I'm also picking up that those who advise you as a department are giving you a wrong formula of success in the agricultural space and wrong intelligence, which is why I'm blaming you to say, you're sitting with information at your disposal, but the application of the information is so dismal that you are failing with all the tools of trade in terms of what is happening in the agricultural space. So I take it is deliberate. Somebody is doing that deliberately. I'm proposing the following. Can we take over the properties that are sitting at Allah? We start a program that will invite all the agricultural practitioners which the department cannot absorb into the system. Because there you are sitting with a skill set of graduates in the profession of agriculture, but they don't have placement, they don't have where they apply their trade. But we're sitting with emerging farmers who are lacking skills in running their farms, and they cannot pay your high-end graduates on market values. Why? Because they don't have the money. Money must be spent on production. Combine the agricultural practitioners with the emerging farmers that need the skill, you will have a successful run farm by people who are qualified to do that, because we're sitting with a list of database of those people. We will then contribute to a challenge that this country is facing, the food security. We got statistics that we are sitting at 16,000 per household lack or shortage of food per household in South Africa, which means we should be focusing on food security just for subsistence, for existence. This is a program where we can redirect, then we can at least have absorption of all the agricultural practitioners into a program of those who are already given farms to produce, but they are failing because they don't have skills. Then this graduate will be able to tap into the resourcefulness of the industry across value chain, from high-end commercial farmers, middle farmers, and then the emerging ones. Then can we also take this program to Amakos? Amakos are sitting with exactly the population that is short of food, but at least they are giving you permanence in terms of guarantee that you will always find the king where he is, other than giving the guys the money tomorrow, the guys have closed shop and they've disappeared. But the king won't disappear with his community. Take this farm, share them with the kings as well. Something is going to come out of that. And then, because I'm saying this thing of kings, because I'm noticing a similar trend again. In your disbursement, you've approved the disbursement of this farm, but at KZN there's zero transfer. But yes, there's approval. So what does that say? Which means there's a problem. I don't know what the problem is, but can we, in the disbursement, consider also Amakos in that space? Why I'm saying that? Because you are also lacking behind in finishing their land claims. So whether you will finish the land claims or not, but at least let there be something that they are doing now with the properties that you are failing to manage because you can't find the right people who can work on them. At least there are kings who say, we need our land. If you can't give us our land, at least give us leased land which we can produce so that we cover the issue of food. At last, Allah, wherever Allah will be sitting post the new financial year, the mandate is agricultural, but the host is land reform. I don't know what are you gonna use as a yardstick to determine whether should it be located under agriculture or land reform? It's your baby, but my point is you will still be sitting with a similar challenge of the running and hosting of UALA because it's about property, which you think is a land issue, but the function is agricultural. So you still have to be working together, whichever way. Thank you.
Thank you, honorable members. Yeah, Honorable Madlala.
Gibingelele Chair, members of the committee, DG and your team. My questions mancane nje. What is the reason for such a low collection of rental payment? And what is being done about that? And what is the relationship between low rental collection and the financial support provided to the farmers? What is the aging of the rental that was supposed to be collected? What measures were taken to collect the rental? Has a determination been made as to why the rental is not collectible? If so, what are the reasons? If the rental are not collectible, why have they not been written off based on the aging and determination done? What are the reasons provided to the Auditor-General for failure to collect? Why are the performance target not being achieved in the spite of the rapid declining target budget allocations? Can the department show the evidence that the adoption of proactive land acquisition strategy shifted away from willing buyer, willing seller policy? Because from that pace and state, it is not obviously. Doesn't the Deeds Register Act allow for the amendment of regulation, allow the Chief Register of Deed to appoint officials in the deed office across the country and train the law graduate to help fast tracking of the plus land transfer while at the same time creating the unemployment graduates with the employment opportunities? I think, Leo Chair, we need to invite the Chief Register so we can engage with him. I thank you.
Thank you. Honorable Mukhaga.
Good morning, honorable members and everybody here. Hey, lo mhlaba nobuyazi ubuyena. Ay, serious, really. Chair, we understand the context of Allah as a mechanism to recoup monies for a department. I concur with the notion that says it's your business unit or business arm. Hence, we have reduced the status of citizens into clients. Because as we are presenting and you continue to present, I had a picture where now citizens of this country has been reduced into clients. A relationship is transactional, no longer a political agenda that the country has committed it. It's a relationship that is transactional. And for me, that's the first problem that must be resolved here by this committee. Because the strategic objective of us committing ourselves to return land to the original owners is an original, from the original scene, the land question. Now, I got a presentation in one of the TV channels presenting a breakdown of the land as by a race group, and I want that from you now. The breakdown since 1994, according to racial groups in the country. That's one. Because for me, to make sense of what you are representing here is to compare it with the actual beneficiaries who's supposed to be benefiting from this exercise. But if I'm ignorant in terms of these breakdowns, I won't have to have a relation to relate with what I think is very critical, including the linked ownership as far as churches, because we heard that big tracts of land are owned by churches, foreigners, and you never shared that with us. And I think now is high time now that we fully understand exactly who owns what in this country. Who owns what? Your intervention allocated in which formula? So that we know exactly that we are intervening on behalf of the working class or the poor, or we are intervening on behalf of all. For now, the beneficiaries are still the haves. The whole budget that you were explaining here, for me, in terms of our people, we are losing. We have registered losses more than the benefit of our people. You have registered losses. Hence, this disparation of consequence management as far as that is concerned. Now, do you intend to re-engineer Allah and change the philosophy for Allah, your philosophy, for the benefit of our people? Because for now, as it is now, our people are not benefiting from this. That's clear. And therefore, your losses in terms of your budget, even if the budget is declining, you can't increase the budget if the beneficiaries are the original beneficiaries during the apartheid era. We wouldn't have even the power, not as a portfolio committee, to fight for a budget that must benefit the perpetrators. It can't be. So that breakdown for me is very important as one. Who owns what here? And therefore your interventions are informed by what? That's the question. The land acquisition institutions. You've mentioned the question of municipalities, but in passing, because my interest is to understand as to whether your intervention in various municipalities, we've got 200 plus municipalities in this country, are recorded by municipalities. Because that's where these farms are. Are your interventions, as you are working on a daily basis, recorded by the municipalities? I understand that municipalities doesn't deal with this question of land, but they are supposed to be one of the beneficiaries. Are they recording what we are doing on a daily basis? As a third sphere of government, there's a greater percentage of people that are excluded, and I don't see possibility of your approach benefiting them. Those who are trapped in villages. This department is not about land reform, it's about rural development. And I would say that your formula excludes those people. I'm coming from, my home is in a village. They've never seen this department for the past 30 years. They've never seen it. They don't know. You get a point? So you're asking a very difficult question to ask the question of a benefit. And I'm saying villages who live in those communal land. Your intervention is not clear as far as that is concerned. Can you elaborate more on this? The benefit of our people in villages, and how much have they benefited from this budget that you are tabling now? This expenditure that you are tabling now, as far as that book. It's increasing for the last financial year, 2024-25, has risen up to 800 million, the debt book. And in some other spheres of government, you would write off a debt. Do we have such a provision? in this department to write off a debt, particularly a debt that affects the disadvantaged. You denied us an opportunity to understand the components of this 800 million. Are these commercial farmers? Are these new entries in the system? Who are these people who have caused this debt? Perhaps that becomes important for us to understand. This question of categorizing farms becomes critical, but here you are thin in terms of making us to understand, because you can't compare orange with apples here, so that we understand exactly who is who. The fruitless and wasteful expenditure in terms of the PFMA is criminal. Once you get fruitless and wasteful expenditure as an irregularity, the head of department is expected to go to the nearest police station and report that case, because it's regarded as a criminal case. What procedures are you following? Because irregularity is the last stage, highest stage of incompetence. And that's where you begin to see the holes in the system. That indeed is either there's corruption here or what constitutes this fruitless expenditure? And what have you done about it? Question. The panel of conveyancers and the comparison of the office of evaluator, when we evaluate what necessitated, because now I thought the brief of this panel might be a duplication, and I'm subject to correction here, might be a duplication of the function of the Auditor-General. If not, what's the difference? And why would you go to the extent of appointing private conveyors? And what costs have you incurred upon appointing these private conveyors? What cost? Because you went to the extent of appointing private conveyancers as far as it's concerned. I thought you'll take us through this financial year under review about the corruption that you've picked up and the disciplinary processes that you have undertaken against those who are breaking the law. I'm raising this because there is a perception out there that officials, firstly, without going to a private sector corruption, but it starts with officials of land and rural development, corruption. Bakuthi gusha, bazithi inkomo. That's what they do. That's what they do. And it's always hidden. It's always hidden. You don't disclose it even in front of the committee. That's why I'm looking to this record of corruption over time that we have managed to nip to deal with question, because former officials of this department are owning farms. Former officials of this department, even some politicians of this department are owning farms, and which attest to this question. How clean are you as far as this, particularly those who are handling these particular matters? It's a question of a record of corruption as you are presenting this, so that we're able to determine the losses because of that corruption that government has incurred thus far. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you. Honorable Matthias.
Thank you so much, Honorable Chair. I don't know whether must I welcome the presentation or I must reject it or frown upon it. Maybe I need to start from the end of their presentation, which concludes with a slide titled Recommendation. What are they really recommending? Maybe the last slide is thank you. Why are they thanking us for? For listening. And listen what? And what are they recommending? What are the recommendations that flows from your presentation? And this is a routine pattern that has been happening for donkey years. And it is in this absence of clear recommendations that officials are covering up of the things that members have mentioned. And if this is a pattern of doing business as usual, we are going nowhere. And maybe we need to have maybe we have to have a white minister to whip not only members of ourselves here in the benches, and all, but also whip officials. A black person's medicine is a white man. So say a Sesotho idiom. What is it that they are recommending? Look, Honorable Chair, in 2021, on matters relating to Allah, the former minister, Toko Didiza, wrote to the Speaker, then Honorable Thandi Modise, about delays in the submission of the annual performance report and financial report of Allah, which the department, in terms of the law, is compelled to submit such before end September of every year. And because of apparent accounting discrepancies and misstatements in the account of Allah, that deadline could not be met. And the minister had to write to the former deputy, to the former speaker, requesting that there should be extension to deal with this misstatements and accounting discrepancies. And I'm picking up a whole lot of such again in what has been presented here, which members have adequately raised those discrepancies. Honorable Chair, the department has got many overlapping, duplicating, or self-duplicating multiple instruments to deliver on one mission and one mission only, which is land acquisition. But there are multiple instruments that I mentioned here that are overlapping and duplicating each other. And perhaps it is in the multiplicity and duplication of these instruments and systems that we've got this problem. One instrument at some point was phased out to replace another. And still, even after such intervention, for instance, PLUS was introduced to replace LRAT. Even after such changes have been made, there's no progress. Allah seems to be moving from one crisis to another. Perhaps I must ask a question. With the plus instrument, which is called Proactive Land Acquisition Strategy. Director-General, what is proactive about this instrument? Because you are failing to acquire land as you have been mandated to do, and you blame it on a whole lot of things. There is a slide here which you are dedicating it, telling us how much budget has been declining, which is slide 12, decline in land acquisition budget. And you mentioned a whole lot of the reason why there's a decline, one of which is change in government priorities. But you are not telling us which those priorities are. You are telling us that one of the reasons is recapitalization and development program. You don't give the details, nonetheless. Strengthening of relative rights program. Still don't give us details. ALA seem to be a bank within the department, an agency or an institute or an entity in which money is collected, ring-fenced for purpose of land acquisition. It's like a bank. But this bank seems not to be managed on the market values that Honorable Mthadwa has mentioned. It seems not to be. It seems to be a pseudo bank within the department, but it's not performing the function that it should, or it's not been run in the manner in which it should. Because if it is that entity that generates revenue, store that revenue, invest it or recapitalize it, surely it must be run profitably, so that on continuous basis is able to raise revenue and continue to acquire land, other than only depending on annual allocation from Parliament. You are standing here at about 14 billion, which you cannot account for fully. So what is the point of having ALA in the current form? And perhaps we must ask another question. What is the relationship between ALA and the reserve and the land bank? I know that there's no relationship at all. But if ALA on face value is designed and its mission and mandate is to raise capital and raise revenue to acquire land, surely it must be run on the same principles as a bank such as the land bank. And what are the collaborative projects between the land bank and ALA, so that we learn through what is called peer review on best practices? Perhaps in the next meeting, DG, please come with a presentation that tells us of the best practices of ALA, which you would have learned through peer review, would have learned through collaborative projects with commercial banks. At some point, perhaps, Honorable Chair, as this is the last point, we'll have to submit a review of the law, of the act that established ALA, and propose alternative methods of handling it. I'm afraid, Honorable Chair, I might not sit too long in the meeting to get the answers from the officials, because at some point I need to leave for a bilateral meeting with another party that of interest. But even if I stay here to wait for answers, I can tell you now, we're not going to get answers to these questions. And that's the tragedy of our parliamentary system and a culture of laissez-faire, a culture of business as usual, because no one cares after all. Thanks, Honorable Chair.
Thank you, very much, Honorable Member. Honorable members will recall that our very first meeting after the election of this committee, we were actually looking at a legacy report, which actually outlined a litany of outstanding matters, which actually had been sitting there for years and on ends. And one of the recommendations was that we would actually go, or at our strat plan, we will actually go through that legacy report with a fine comb so that we identify specific issues that we want to run with and actually put time frames so that we really do our work as this committee, that of oversight. If we need to break a leg to do that, we would need to do so, because we are going to fall into the trap that when a legacy report, actually another legacy report is actually compiled about our performance, we also become another problematic legacy that actually failed to do the work. So I'm not too sure whether this committee is actually ready and prepared to be counted on the list of legacy, should I say, failures? I don't think so. Honorable Dr. Matlase.
Thank you, Chairperson. Thank you to the committee, DG, and the staff. I have some few questions here. On the slide 13, I just want to know why it doesn't show the performance against the targets. The second question, if we are disposing the land, is there a need for warehousing going forward? The third question, to avoid the delays in land reform, I'm asking the department that should we purchase or acquire the land and transfer it straight to the farmers? Why are we purchasing it, transfer it to the state, and then later transfer it to the farmers? Why can't we acquire it and transfer it straight to the beneficiaries to avoid delays? On the slide 6, the LD infrastructure under construction at the cost of 2.17 million. I don't know, it's million, it's billion. It's million. What infrastructure has been referred to here? Can you clarify which area and province are we referring in this slide? And the total cost per project. Just for interest's sake, can you explain what is meant by historical debt and why it's referred to as a historical? The last point is my opinion, but I want to ask the DG and the DDG. In my opinion, the enterprise development and the rural land development sections must remain with the Department of Land Reform. I want to ask, what is your view in that regard? I don't know you heard me, or should I repeat it? My opinion is that the enterprise development and rural land development should remain with the Department of Land Reform, Rural and Land Reform, not transferred to the Department of Agriculture as per division of the two departments. I hope that question was clear also. Thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you, Honorable Mahlatsi. The last would be Honorable Dr. Pocho.
Thank you, Honorable Chair. When you presented Allah, and I must, in the month of Ramadan, be very, cautious on exactly how I pronounce it. Otherwise, it may sound a little bit inconsiderate. But the work of Allah is a land-owning entity, very much like Grosse Point or Attack or the Atterbury Group or one of those, just that it is within agricultural land and not commercial or industrial property, if I understand correctly. And I believe that could be a huge generator of finances, because that's why people start listed companies, land holding companies, to generate money. Now, I know it's a little bit more difficult to generate money through agriculture than through factories or the rental of shops. But the idea, if I would understand it correctly, is that the state gives the money to start with and to acquire the land, and this specific entity doesn't sell land, it just holds land in order to give people the opportunity to work the land without the capital outlay of buying it, but then they have to pay rent, and they have a 30-year lease, which should in fact satisfy the banks to give the money, the operating capital. So this seems to me like a very feasible model, but the problem lies in the graph on page 20 with revenue collection. And I think that's to me, that's the essence of the problem. Why this sucks money rather than provides money or generates money. Maybe you could respond to that. I also listened to Honorable Mgaga, who said that is the purpose to benefit people or to make money. I really think it should be both, because if farmers settled in such project make money, they pay taxes, they pay this thing in order to be able to buy more land, to do more development. And I think it's actually a very good idea. Then everybody benefits by it. Where I stay is not within a project, but in the area of the Orange River project. And those lands were put available in the 80s when the commercial interest rate was something like 18 or 90%. And the way in which it was put available to farmers were with a subsidized interest rate of 15%. Now that's really not very low. It's just lower than it had been in commercial terms, but 15% is a very high interest rate, but there were some limits. Farmers couldn't build houses. They had to construct some kind of dwelling within a store, within I don't know what you call it exactly in English, a schuur. And they may not buy certain stuff for the farm before the pivots were paid off and similar things. And those are presently very wealthy farmers who started in a very difficult way. So this kind of thing, I think, should be able to generate money for the country. I'm a little bit concerned, and I decided not to go into the debate with Honorable Mtetwa, but we really cannot, every time that something doesn't work, say the white farmers collude to stop it from working. I want to say categorically that is not the case. And I don't think we assist in this whole process if everything which doesn't work is in some way ascribed to the collusion of white farmers who explicitly want to exclude emerging black farmers. And if I could prove it with just one thing, I would say it's because Afrikaners can never stand together, even if they would try to do so, which I say they don't. They don't have the ability to cooperate in such a way. But it's a problem, and I think that land reform is the one thing in which people on both sides of the debate think their own opinion is self-evident. It can't actually be argued about. And I think maybe I'm one of about 100 people in the country who could really argue on both sides and really can live myself into the position of both sides. But on the one hand, we have people who say, but can't you share? Can't you restore the dignity of people whose land were taken away in the colonial wars? And it's legitimate. On the other hand, you have people who say, but just show me successful projects to prove to me that it's worth spending the money. And for every, that's what I hear, I don't say it. For every successful project that you can show me, I'll show you 3 unsuccessful projects. We can't waste land in that way, we can't waste money in that way. And in that sense, both groups think that what they think is a self-evident truth which could actually not be argued. Now, if this committee has to do something, it has to break open this debate so that both sides can see the other side. Otherwise, we are going nowhere. Thank you.
Well, thank you, honorable members. May I please hand over to the DG for responses? Yeah, can we actually give, because there were very many questions that they need to respond to, and if we still have a bit of time after responses, then we will consider follow-ups. Yeah.
In writing, my questions.
Respond in writing.
Yes,
In all the questions,
my questions.
or your questions?
Yes.
Well, I think they can do both for the benefit of this meeting, because arising from their responses to your questions, there may be interest from other members to do and make follow-ups here. Okay, thank you. And not unless there is a planned meeting of the Progressive Caucus. Of which you are not members, therefore we cannot be disadvantaged. Okay, thank you, Honorable DG.
Thank you very much, Chair. Quite a lot of issues, maybe that we as a department at different levels would need to respond to, especially because I can categorize this into the strategic issues that I will respond to that were asked broadly in terms of the department itself. There were issues that were asked that were financial in nature that I will request the CFO to first respond to. Secondly, around the matters around property management, I will ask Ntate Shilote to respond to. And then when it comes to the technical issues that have got to deal with how the program is being run, I'll ask Ntate Ndove just to give a response. And I'll then wrap up with the areas that members had specifically asked me to respond to. If it favors the chair's wish, then we can go in that way.
Thank you, DG. Thank you, Chair. Thank you, honorable members. I'll touch some of the questions and then the others will be handled by my colleagues. I'm not sure whether to go line or should I try to clap. Okay, let me do line by line. Okay. The question around the reconciliations, and I would, just to explain the reconciliations around around recap. So recap as a model, the way it was done, it gave department as well as the farmer responsibilities. So the responsibility of the farmers was to ensure that they submit documents to the department that then the department will then be able to reconcile. So at the end of the production cycle and at the end of the production cycle or the contract being terminated, there were reconciliations. So reconciliations have been happening over years, every year. Hence, Allah had unqualified audit at some point, clean audit. So the issue came with the money that is reconciled as unaccounted because farmers did not bring initially, the necessary document to prove how they used the money for. And with that, then it then also kicks out or brings in the issue of project management and contract management. That is the element that then brings back or introduces fruitless and wasteful expenditure. That would be where adequate project management and contract management would not have been dealt with to an extent that there's loss that we could quantify. So the recons at that particular time were there, but the challenge was this money was not been accounted for. You can't tell what these farmers did with the money. So that is the context around that. And so with this process, what we're doing is the process that I've engaged in terms of with farmers that brings in those that respond and those that don't respond that have to be dealt with legally. But there will be cases where a clear project management and consequence management would not have been done, and the cases that would have sent to forensic investigation and consequence management is been done. So currently the cases are with labor relation, and I would not necessarily give the number of cases. I don't have the information now, but there are cases that are currently with labor relations, and there are also cases that are currently sitting with a committee that we have, which we call Financial Compliance Committee in the department, that then does an investigation in terms of contract management, project management, what happened, and then make a ruling with regard to that. Then those cases are then dealt with through employee relations. So in terms of the number, Chair will provide the number of cases that are currently with ER. But I take note and I agree, Chair, that irregular and fruitless and wasteful expenditure that really we're not supposed to have. The measures that we're taking with regard to are they spending with the expenses that we've got now, the provinces are spending, are they spending in line with prescripts? The bigger irregular expenditure we had in previous years mainly related to programs. So how programs are then designed became a bit of a challenge. So with the current one, the recap model in its own has been scrapped because it is creating this challenge. The model that we have adopted to ensure that we don't have fruitless and wasteful expenditure under LDS is that we partner with the banks. So what happens is that immediately when we pay a farmer, that money sits in what we call a grant holding account. Only the bank, FNB and ABSA, have got the control over that money. So farmers will go and procure what they need to procure. Department will go and do monitoring and evaluation of what they want to procure first, together with the commodity organization, and what has been procured. Only after that has been ticked on, then the request to the bank to release. And that request to the bank has to be co-signed by the department, by the commodity organization also, before the bank can release. So the model has had to be changed drastically to ensure that we know that the money we're giving to farmers are spent on what is supposed to be spent on. So in that case, the budget that we've appropriated, that is expensed, indicated there, is spent in line with the predetermined objectives. How many people have they benefited? Currently, ALA, as I indicated, acquires commercial properties. We're currently sitting with about 1,827 contracts that we have within the hectares that I've indicated. Most of our properties, our beneficiaries, is mainly a one-on-one relation, meaning the beneficiary will apply, and then we will then appoint, will then approve a beneficiary, and then they will be allocated a land. There are properties, especially around Mpumalanga side, where you've got a mixture of a big property has been acquired, and then the other side would be a land beneficiary, and then there would be farm dwellers and labor tenants. And you'll find that we'll go through a process where would subdivide, and then the other portion be given to farm laborers and labor tenants that are in those farms, and then the others would be would be given the other side of the farm. So the 1,827 that I'm talking about is those that have got a contract. So in terms of the entire beneficiaries, we'll also just give a report on the entire beneficiaries of this program. The issue around leases, the issue around the impact, I'm gonna classify it as impact because the question is, are we getting value out of this property? Is there an impact in terms of improving the quality of life and so forth? We did a farm assessment, a farm assessment report, because we wanted to understand the impact and the value of how these properties are impacting. The report, the majority of the farmers that we have, also the question was asked, it's emerging farmers. We don't have, majority are emerging farmers. So these emerging farmers, when they are given this land, the aim is to make sure that we then get them into production, capacitate them, and then so that they can then be able to handle big commercial entities. There was also a question that was asked, what is the targets that we're chasing? In terms of productivity, we meant to make sure that 100% of our properties are productive, meaning they're supposed to be producing, and we're supposed to be employment from that property, and in turn, as ALA is a business model, they're supposed to be we're supposed to be getting revenue out of those leases. So the model is designed in such a way that we have to go through that entire value chain. The model itself, as I indicated, over the years has had some challenges. Challenges with regard to its impact. The report is indicating as much as we bought good land, but the impact is in terms of making the land productive is at a very low rate. Hence, the recapitalization development program needed to be also reviewed and introduced with the land development support that also looked at the bigger impact that this portfolio can make. Land development support was only introduced in 2018-19 financial year, so we're in the fifth year of implementation. We're due to review the plus or minus 200 properties that we've built, we've supported in the program, and to see the bigger impact of the program itself. But if you look at recap, it didn't do much in terms of raising the productivity levels in those farms. How do you measure production success? With this portfolio, and when we introduced the land development support, we had agreed to measure success of this project looking at the bottom line. What is it these entities are getting? What is it that this beneficiary are getting? What is the net income of these beneficiaries getting at the end of this capital outlay that would have given in the form of a land, as well as support in terms of financial support and so forth. And the yardstick is that if they make 300,000 turnover per financial year, we'll be moving towards at least the lower entry level of commercialization, with the idea that because they will now be self-sustainable and commercial, they will then be building in, would be making more money for them to be able to then increase production and get more money. I think what, as I said, there are projects that are doing very well in terms of that model. They get into the entry level of commercialization, and then they build in on the production, and they get to a high level of commercial bracket, and they're then servicing the lease. Revenue collection, how do we plan to change the situation around revenue collection? As indicated by honorable members, that ALA was established as a sort of like a business wing or entity, trading entity of the department. And this trading entity set up when it was introduced had some challenges. The trading entity was initially set up in CFO's office to manage. And then we did an assessment. When we assessed when we got the diagnostic report of the operation of this entity, the recommendation was that where it's sitting in CFOs, it needs to be moved to where business is happening. And currently business is happening in land redistribution. So what had happened is that property management was sitting in another branch, land acquisition was sitting in another branch, and then the entity itself, from a management point of view, was sitting in finance. And it created these challenges with regard to coordination and smooth running of this entity, of this trading entity, to arrive at where members are saying it's supposed to be a trading entity in recouping and changing these issues of revenue collection. Currently then, after we did the assessment, we moved it to, the department took a decision to move it to land redistribution and tenure reform branch, where it is situated, where now your property management, your land acquisition, and your finance will then be sitting in that branch. With the challenges that are currently happening, and for us to be able to get it running and do collection that is required, capacity is required, but also the we then concluded that we need to re-engineer it completely. So there's a re-engineering project around ALA that we did, a concept around re-engineering it completely, because currently at its form, to manage this big strategy, it will not necessarily take us where we want to go. So with that is the plan with it, because we really need to up production, but most importantly, we need to make sure that operations on the ground farms are productive, so that they can then be the spin-off of collection, more money in the system, and getting in. And so there's a direct relations around that. We, as indicated, currently drafted the revenue enhancement strategy, still a draft document. And in that revenue enhancement strategy, there are key areas that we're looking at. One is to ensure that we ensure we strengthen the billing chain of the entity, making sure that we bill we on time, the statements are then received from farmers, using other ways, emails, all other, we are in contact and communicating with the farmers. We look at infrastructure maintenance part, because in some instances our farms are not yielding on what's supposed to yield, and your leasee will say, but this and this is not working and it's hampering my production. We then have to then come in looking at that infrastructure refurbishment area, looking at also capacity of capacitating the leases, as well as property management as a whole. That's a strategy that we're looking at, because to run it, we have to look at all these other areas, and with also the state land transfer project, hence we're starting to see this revenue increasing. The measures for farmers that we've been taking for farmers that we're not collecting, currently what is happening is that we've got an agreement, a lease agreement. It has clauses, it has breach clauses. We've got debt management processes that we are running. The state land, the contract is very clear. Not paying rental is a breach, and that breach gets to a point where it then allows for termination. And what we've currently started to do is to now move through this legal process of legally recovering and also terminating. Obviously, looking at the merits of each case, and then referring them to legal services, as well as property management to deal with termination issues. Capacity of state land administrators, and I'll also give it Mr. Shiloto to come in. That is also huge, because it has a big impact on the collection. Because where, as I said, the leasee would complain about this and this, we should be able to get in, deal with those things swiftly, so that we can then be able to deal with that. The other issue around the transfer, I'm gonna pass. Unaccounted funds. When we on recap how many we're dealing with around 530 or so farmers that had not accounted that we're currently dealing with. We'll provide those numbers in terms of those that have signed off the debt assessment. We'll open the report now just to give you the detailed number in terms of how many, or we can just give it in a written format in terms of the numbers, because we've got that information. How many accepted this debt arrangement form, and how many are at legal assessment, and so forth. Then the other question was saying that why does it take 6 months to finalize legal assessment? And I myself have been having a lot of meetings with legal colleagues, and they always say legal process is the legal process. You can't bypass it. The assessment that they do is very detailed. One, because we don't want to get into an extent where we go for a legal, because we're dealing with around 500 or so farmers. We don't want to get to a point where we take all these farmers for a legal process. At the end of the day, we spend a lot of legal fees, and then we recover nothing, because that would be asked to prove that we would have looked at the reasonability of us recovering. So that is precisely why it's taking some time to deal with the legal assessment. We've had a meeting with them also just recently, just to gauge the assessment criteria and why it's taking long. But from that point of view, the legal assessment becomes very detailed. Even the ones that then gets to state attorney for summons, just the consultation process to get to a point where they then say prospects of the case, there's good prospects to recover, takes a bit of time. So 6 months, it's with our assessment, it's not enough to deal with these numbers. In terms of what is our vision in terms, what is our vision in terms of NDP targets, and what does ALA contribute there? So in terms of NDP, ALA contributes to Chapter 6. So we contribute to the 30% target on land acquisition. I say we contribute because there's land that has been acquired in other areas. There's land that has been acquired through redistribution, through restitution process. There's land that is also acquired through tenure reform program. So the one that is sitting in ALA is specifically land that has been acquired for redistribution purpose. And then this land is then acquired, and then it is then leased to previously disadvantaged people. So that's how we enter into space. So the 2.4 million hectares that we've acquired contributes towards the bigger land acquisition process. So this land under ALA, which is under PLUS program, is currently owned by the state, but then it's leased out. So the ownership model, indeed, if we were to draw the report, the owner of that land is the state, is government. So that is why now this project of transferring title to the lessee who would have met certain criteria. So we contribute towards that target. We also contribute towards the target of ensuring that this land is productive before we transfer. As I indicated earlier, that the target is to make sure that 100% of the land then is productive. The next question, I think I also covered it, to say who is in this portfolio. Do we have commercial farmers, emerging farmers? Who is who here? This is previously disadvantaged farmers. When they get in the process, these farmers are not commercial at all. The new entrants that come in mostly would have been farming at a subsistence level, and then they are then given a bigger land, and then the strategy is to make sure that then we work with these farmers until they get to a point where they are commercial in nature, and then then they exercise their option to purchase that land, and then they would buy that land at market value, and then it will exit the system. So that's how the value chain of ALA is. Obviously, throughout the year, the value chain gets to be altered a bit as with the introduction of 30-year leases and introduction of a state land transfer project. But that's how the value chain is. There was a question in terms of who are the farmers that are selling this land. In terms of the PLUS portfolio, we don't have. But the previous program, and I think DDG Ndobe and Mr. Shiloto will talk about the other progress, like and the LRAD challenges in terms of selling of land and so forth. But with PLUS, the land is owned by the state, and it's only transferred to beneficiaries, and when they are transferred, you need to make sure that they don't sell it. There's certain conditions that are there for them to ensure that they just don't sell and reverse the gains that we've made. ALA is a business wing. The intention is not to lose money, it's true. the billing, the debt book is sitting at 820. At some point, with the 2013 policy, we did not bill because we were contributing towards assisting the farmers to set up. We came back and we billed and I think 18, 19. That's why we're seeing that debt book continuing. There was a question around COVID-19. When we did the payment holiday, we didn't do it precisely as a result of COVID-19. Because these farmers, because when they enter the system, they are previously disadvantaged from the word go. So COVID did not necessarily, which is still an factor because it made situation worse. But when they came in, also they were at a worse situation. So that's why the policy at the time was that let's give these farmers 5 years. At least it will assist without us leaving them. It will also assist in trying to speed up them getting into a situation where at least they're making a bottom line that is, that is better. Treasury did approve, and then when they did approve, we then entered into a process of giving discounts when we brought back the billing. And then that's when Treasury then said, when you bring this discount, this would be a contribution towards the COVID-19 pandemic. Because the farmers are struggling, let them come in, we give them discounts from the lease side, and that's what would be the benefit. So we did not administer any other funding except for that, and farmers, in terms of the Solidarity Fund, is process that is managed outside ALA. But from ALA's perspective around COVID-19, they did get discounts, and those discounts were approved by Treasury, just to also assist to alleviate the pressures that have been there. The placement, the APP, I'm going to leave the two comments to DG, and also the issue around the Amakosi and the APPs. I've touched what is the mandate of ALA and how we relate to Chapter 6 to NDP. The question that was asked, which is very critical, is the reasons for low collection rate against this financial support. We also had a spending review assessment that was done by National Treasury on this on the entity itself. And one of the issues that also came out very strong is the relationship between farmer support and collection. That if farms are not operational and people are not getting money at the end of the day, there is no way they're going to pay you. So that is why the issue around funding for development becomes also very critical, because you would need to then ensure that there is development on the ground for us to be able to get money. It is a big factor. The farm assessment report that we did indicated that farmers that received recap were better off than farmers that did not receive any recap or any form of funding. In a form of looking at infrastructure also, the infrastructure that with farmers that got funding are better than those that did not receive funding. So there is a huge relationship, hence the draft strategy is indicating that balance of farmer support as well as in collection rate, it's very important. The aging of the debt, it's old. And I'm gonna couple it with the issue that says, why do we say historical debt? We had about three policies in the space on state land and lease disposal policy. The first state land and lease disposal policy that was adopted was levying rates using market value, like a normal business. Market value of the farm, and then would levy. There was some outcry also from farmers that we are just new entrants, we are developing farmers, you charge us at a market rate and if you can imagine if you've got a big farm, it was an outcry, especially farms that are around Gauteng and Western Cape. You can imagine the rate per hectare in farms like Gauteng and Western Cape, how expensive they are. So that was the first policy, and that's when we say historical debt, we then relate to that policy, where we were then charging that we were charging market value. We then moved to what we call the payment holiday, the 2013 policy. Then we moved to a discounted rate of levying these properties. Currently, we are using a cost model. So whatever cost, what we bought, the value we used to buy the land is what we used to then to determine our rental charges. So you could see that we looking at also the developmental wing of it, we needed to balance the high rate of billing as well as the developmental aspect of the mandate. The aging of it, it's old. This debt started in 2007. And as I said, in between stopped, and then we then gave back and come back to the discounted model and now the cost model. The issue around the deeds and the CRD, I would leave it to Mr. Shilote. Ownership, I think I've touched that. ALA re-engineering for the benefit of the people, or re-engineering ALA as a model. That is basically what the re-engineering report we sanctioned, to look at ALA business model, to see how we can institutionally structure this entity so that it can then get to the mandate that we would want it to do.
There's just no aircon in the entire building. In fact, everywhere in Parliament, the aircons are down. In every building. Maybe we'll open that one over there. And the other doors are locked. Yeah, it's a major problem. I don't know who to talk to about this and who should talk to who, because it's not only here, virtually in all. You remember in the committee room in 90 Plain Street, we are also roasted there. I don't know. Yeah, I think it's something that one needs to raise with the Speaker at some point, or with the Secretary of Parliament. It can't be right that, you know, these aircons cannot be serviced. Okay. Sorry for interruption.
No problem, Chair. I'm getting to conclusion with regard to finance question. I've touched the debt book that have been increasing. The fruitless and wasteful expenditure, how do we deal with it? The fruitless and wasteful expenditure is managed through fruitless and wasteful expenditure framework that has been approved by that has been issued by National Treasury. So in the framework, there would be cases where there are cases where we suspect fraud and corruption. Those cases are then taken to our Forensic Investigation Directorate unit. They then do the investigation, and then what they then do is if they did indeed ascertain or suspect the issues of fraud and corruption, what then happens is that these cases they are then referred to SAPS for investigation. So that's how fruitless and wasteful and irregular expenditure is currently run in the department also. I think the whole area around this investigations and corruptions and so forth, I will leave it to the DG. The issue of the ALA accounting issues and multiple instruments. The issue of the ALA delay that in 2021 related to an accounting disagreement that we had with the Auditor-General. And that accounting disagreement we had to be taken to National Treasury, of which National Treasury came back and agreed with the interpretation of the department. So if you look at ALA, it got unqualified opinion last year because the qualification was removed. But that accounting interpretation, the department was correct with regard to how they've accounted for this for the issue of the recap. The issue of the multiple instruments, currently ALA in its form is only implementing PLUS. We had other programs, we had SRR, we had one household, 1 hectare. All those projects in ALA have been discontinued. So we're only dealing with PLUS, with the model that we acquire, we develop, we allocate, and then we transfer the land. So we're no longer using multiple instruments. But there in some instances where you would require different instruments within the redistribution space. And DDG Ndobe, I think, will touch on that one. There was a question to say budget is declining, why, what are we, and we indicated that there are other areas, but what is it that we are prioritizing and we are not clear. With the budget decline and the competing activities within ALA, the juggling of balancing the budget becomes very critical because you don't want to leave any area of the strategy not being dealt with. And I said, with the fact that there's declining budget, there's also low revenue collection, balancing this budget, it becomes a problem. And that's why you'll see that the land acquisition budget had to be, the allocation we got from Fiscus then needs to be then split between all these priorities, property management, land development support, and so forth, and some goods and services to be able to run ALA. The last question is around, okay, so there are two questions. The business model, I've indicated the profitability that we started at market value, I think I touched that. Best practice, the project that we handled with Land Bank. When we started land development support, the idea was that this portfolio, when it comes to financing for development, they will then be financed through Land Bank. Land Bank will come in and then they will offer loans or a blended finance into these farmers, to develop these farmers, which will have alleviated a big portion in terms of the budget for development support. What then happened is that with the Land Bank, they operate as a commercial entity. So they will treat a transaction and the leasee as a commercial entity. And in most instances, our farmers are still at a very low base to get into that space. So currently land development support is creating a base for these farmers to graduate to get into the blended finance space where there is co-financing with the Land Bank. There's also another fund that we have with Land Bank that is for farmer support, where we guaranteed certain farmers to get loans, production loans from Land Bank. But we've got the guarantee with Land Bank in case they default, then we know that the state would be able to handle that. Those farmers were able to then access production loans to be able to deal with that. From an operation level, this is where we interact, but at a strategic level, I will also leave it to DG. There was a question on targets, page 13, just go to the page 13 on the presentation. Why we're not showing the target or performance. The plus target set would, so if you look at those targets set, except for the 2024 and 5 financially, which the year has not yet met, we will not have had a full performance. But I think we should be able to then provide the performance targets per financially, as well as where we are in the third quarter as the next slide, so that we can be able to see the comparison. The issue on state land transfer, Mr. Shilote, the issue on WIP, what is in LDS infrastructure? The LDS infrastructure under WIP, this is the question was which area and what are we doing there? The LDS model funds for production support. It then funds for infrastructure development. So if, for instance, it's a poultry farm, we'll build poultry houses and so forth. It has also some movable assets that we then fund, and some operational expenses that we fund. And the whole portfolio of land development support for all provinces will be able to give you a breakdown of how many projects in which provinces and the areas that are there. The one that is specifically also indicated there as WIP is in relation to a program that was done with NERPO, especially for the red meat beneficiaries all over the country, where NERPO would go as our agent and then finalize the procurement with for those. And this includes houses, mostly it's houses and fencing in these farms. But for also internal, the entire LDS has got, for all other provinces, has got those areas that we fund. I've touched on the historical debt, the issue of enterprise development and rural development. ALA is going to the Department of Land Reform, not the Department of Agriculture. So ALA is sitting with the Department of Land Reform. Then obviously within ALA, ALA is a mandate that is brought through by a Land Reform Act, where we need to make sure that we acquire this land, strategically acquire this land. And by acquiring this land, there is a production. That coordination with the Department of Agriculture is very critical, because you don't want the some of the expertise would sitting with agriculture, but you would want that seamless inter-working relationship within the department, which we're currently working on through an MOU process. So, but as it is formed currently, ALA that has got the development arm, it's sitting with the budget that has been finalized, is sitting with the Department of Land Reform. I think that should conclude the finance question. I think the last two, Chair, were comments around how the entity is. Indeed, ALA is a land-owning entity. It's a property that does acquire. But the intention, as much as it was to keep, as I indicated, the intention was never to hold this land and warehouse. And there was a question to say, why do you warehouse if you can transfer directly to the intention of warehousing is to make sure that when you get the farmer in,
you give them the necessary support, and while they are ready to take over the farm, they then can be able to take over the farm, and then you let them go. Because the previous LRAT strategy was we were giving this land directly to the farmers, and the performance was also not good because some of these farmers will not farm, they will sell it off and get proceeds out of it. It was just to protect that we make sure that we capacitate the farmers, and then these farmers can then handle this. As I indicated, the intention was we were holding or housing for only 5 years. And then they can then operate these farms. But looking at the strategy as a whole, as it is ambitious, hence the policy was changed to the 30 years. I'll hand over to Mr. Shilote. Thank you.
Well, thank you. I heard you actually saying that there are some strategic questions that you would refer to the DG. Okay, DG.
Thank you very much, Chair, Honorable Chair, and the esteemed members of the committee, DG, DDG, Chief of Staff, CFO, and other colleagues. Good afternoon. I'll respond to few of the questions. There was a question by Honorable Adams on the 199 projects that are at various stages of conveyancing for the state land transfer as to how far are they from finalization. It is not possible at this point to indicate as to how far exactly, but I mean, there are various stages. There are projects where farmers still need to sign the donations agreements, but and we as the state, we have already signed. There are projects where, the conveyancers, the state attorney has already started with the process. They have requested, your rates and taxes figures from the municipalities. In other cases, we've received the clearance certificates. They just need to lodge and transfer. So it's not easy to say how far exactly, but we are pushing, and also to indicate that the decision to allow provinces to appoint private conveyancers is aimed at accelerating, this process to make sure that we transfer within a very short space of time. And one believes that next time when we come here, we will be able to register, considerable progress, beyond the 22 that have been transferred. There was also a question about the 7 in Northern Cape, which were approved, but they were not transferred, as to why have they not been transferred up to so far. There have been challenges with the rates and taxes on these properties to an extent that the province even had to meet with the municipalities, the CFOs and the municipal managers to try and sort out, because the billing was incorrect. They had billed the properties as if they were, urban properties. So we queried the bills, and they had to go back and revise so that we can pay the correct amount. So the properties are now, in the pipeline to be transferred soon. And then there was a question around land that is sold to the department by Honorable Teto, to say the land that is being sold to the department is defective, it's got faults and so on. Issues around its valuation, evaluation and so on. Perhaps just to quickly indicate that when we buy land, we get the Provincial Department of Agriculture to do what we call a farm assessment or agricultural assessment to inform us whether that property can be worthwhile to acquire. And on the basis of that, we then appoint a valuer, and the Office of the Valuer-General, as stipulated by the Valuations Act of 1914, is the one that determines the values on these properties. So once the Valuer-General has indicated how much, and we then use that value to acquire the properties. And the study which was done by a consortium of NCICA and the Agricultural Research Council around 2018, 2019 has revealed that a sizable, in fact, a significant, percentage of the farms that we've acquired are good farms. So I think from that evidence-based point of view, we are quite certain that these farms should be able to enable the beneficiaries to, improve their lives if they are given also other forms of support, but also if they put shoulder to wheel, because some of them have been supported quite extensively, but they still fail. So that's a reality that we have to deal with, on a regular basis. And then there was a question by Honorable Madlala on the Register of Deeds, whether it's not possible for Register of Deeds to assist in training legal graduates to assist with the transfer of land, as part of speeding up the transfer of land. I can confirm that there has been training of internal officials to undertake, the work of transferring properties by the Office of the Register of Deeds. However, we then hit a snag when it came to the issue of requesting clearance figures from municipalities, because as part of conveyancing, you have to request the clearance figures from the municipality, and then you pay the outstanding rates and taxes, and then you are able to get a clearance certificate and you lodge at the deeds office. So we hit a wall there, because the municipalities, the majority of municipalities are using an electronic system. They call it LexisNexis, which only conveyancers can be able to log into and request, the rates and taxes figures from municipalities. Unfortunately, because our officials are not necessarily conveyancers, they could not, request those figures. So it was an option that we had considered as part of, ramping up performance. However, that's why we've now resorted to utilizing private conveyancers, and there was also a question around that to say, is it not a duplication to use conveyancers? And I think it was Honorable Mhaha who asked that question. Well, we ordinarily would have desired that the state attorney undertakes this work as we had initially envisaged. However, because of the capacity constraints in the office of the state attorney, we have had, numerous delays in terms of this transfer, and that's why you see we've got, over 200 projects that have been approved, but only 22 have been transferred so far. Is because of the fact that the bulk of them, when we started, were given to state attorney. However, they have not been able to effect those transfers because of their capacity constraints. And that's why we've now said, let's utilize private conveyancers as provided for in terms of the PFMA and Treasury regulations. We established a panel and provinces are supposed to appoint from that panel the conveyancers to ensure that the transfers take place. And we hope there will be improvement around that. So it's not necessarily a duplication of work that is done by state attorney. We've just taken some of the pressure off the state attorney, because we realize that if we're going to rely only on the state attorney, these transfers will take years to happen. And I'm sure honorable members would not be happy with us if we delay. So we're trying to improve. There was a question around what is proactive about plus. Well, the proactiveness is the fact that we acquire the land and then we advertise it and make it available to those who qualify, who have applied. Unlike in the past where people will bring the land to us, as potential beneficiaries and would then evaluate and then buy that land. In this case, we are, as the state, are the ones who buy it without any beneficiary having been identified, you know, upfront, and then we advertise it and make it available. Okay. I think the other issue, question around warehousing has been responded to by CFO to indicate that when we acquire and dispose directly, there's no need to warehouse. And actually, as we speak now, we are busy working on various instruments, grant regimes that will enable us to acquire and transfer directly to our beneficiaries. We're working on those options because we're trying to move away from the leasehold as directed by the IMC, whereby eventually we will have minimal or few properties that will still hold as the state under leasehold, and those mainly would be farms aimed for incubation and training of our farmers. Chair, I think I'll pause there. I'll stop there. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Mr. Schlotter. And greetings to Chair and members and my colleagues. Mr. Schlotter, you did not talk about the difference between conveyances and OVG. It was indicated whether it's not duplication. Yeah, the Office of Valuer-General is an independent office that do valuations for land reform purposes, valuation only. But the conveyances is various participants that are there. It's a legal profession. The other one is evaluation. It's not a legal profession. And then that one, they've been mandated to legally transfer properties from one person to another, or from one company to another. So their functions are completely different. I just thought I should clarify that. Maybe let me start with the difficult one. What is the vision of land redistribution going forward? I think we have, in the past, tried to explain how we have traveled. Even today, we have none, and we have seen the pitfalls. Even today's presentation, we can see where we have been struggling. And obviously, land redistribution needs to be in a manner that it's able to address, firstly, the constitutional obligation. Secondly, to be sure that we are in line with the white paper, which is the fundamental policy document that guides land reform in this country. And when I say land reform, I'm not referring to land redistribution. I'm saying to land reform in its totality. And the role of land redistribution is clearly articulated in that. I can confess that over time we've kind of like deviated a bit away from what the policy says. Because one of the important issues is that we are responsible for land reform. And I want to emphasize land reform. Not land for a particular purpose only, for all purposes. And we have to find a balance of ensuring that we don't slide towards a particular land only and leave the other. Because the Constitution says we need to address the needs of the poor, the landless. I'm talking about the white paper. The needs of the poor, the landless, the homeless, and vulnerable. And we need to equitable, in an equitable basis, make land accessible to citizens. And it's land for everything. The argument will be, yes, there's more land for agriculture, but having more land of agriculture does not make us to only focus on agriculture. We have to address all the needs, because there is no other department that can fulfill that function, if not us. And we also have to look at what is our core mandate, and also what are the concurrent functions. So I'll give an example that if you look at the Constitution, I think Schedule 4, if I'm not mistaken, I may be wrong there, but somewhere there. Yeah? Yeah. You realize it clarifies actually what is the role of different, let me say, sectoral departments in terms of either being national competency or being a concurrent function. If we can sit and say, how much money are we spending on land? There is no other department that can do that except our department. But if you look at how much money are we spending on agriculture, it's not us who spend. There are many other participants that's supposed to play their role. And their role cannot be replaced by the department that is only responsible for mandate of land only. And I'm saying this just to balance the discussion that indeed, as we move forward, and with the dwindling resources that we have indicated, definitely, this country will remain the way it is in terms of inequality or inequity in terms of land, unless more effort and more resources, because the state has got a responsibility to make resources. That's what the Constitution says, that the state have to make resources available to ensure that there is equitable access to land by citizens. So we need to find that balance all the time. When we move around here, and you'll see informal settlement coming up. If you go to just outside town, you stand there, you see how many buses and taxis that are flowing to town every day. That's a cost in the environment. It's a cost in terms of disposable income for these people that are traveling. And again, it means we're still protecting the apartheid spatial plan, that these people should come and work and go and sleep at wherever and just come and work. These are the issues that needs to be addressed, just beyond matters that relate only to matters of agriculture only. And I'm not saying that agriculture is very important, but that balance has to be maintained as we move forward. And so that it becomes very clear that we cannot duplicate what other departments are doing. Yet we've got all our own mandate, and they will not do our mandate. So that balance has to be there. Maybe not only balance, maybe some kind of discipline. Yeah, maybe to say so that you protect, because we're going to be measured in terms of the mandate that we have as a department. And land redistribution becomes a very key component of the three land reform components to address that. Because it is not based on whether you have been removed before in terms of restitution or you don't have a tenure right. It is based on trying to build, to create, to reduce the imbalance that we have in the country in terms of land access and land ownership. And that is where land redistribution has to be positioned, like moving forward. Obviously, there are a lot of debates that are going to happen. You remember, we still have to come up with the bill. We have not given you the details, but these are some of the issues that will have to be debated as to what extent can we make land redistribution an anchor for land reform in the country and to address key fundamental challenges that we have in the country. The issue around communication, I think in what I've said, is included communication between our department and other departments. And I'm not going to say only Department of Agriculture, all other departments. You see, certain things have to be corrected as we move forward. I think our department is supposed also to play a role of being a coordinator and a facilitator, rather than a doer in all, because we can't do everything. There are things that we just have to facilitate, and I think we must be happy to do that and stop there. I'll give you an example. If we have to give land for human settlement, we don't have to build houses. We don't have to. We don't have to put money aside. The least that we can do maybe is to make sure the land is properly demarcated. It has got basic, requirements in order for development to happen. Yes. Okay. Now, if we create land like we have a given land to SEZ in Limpopo, for industrial development and economic zone. We don't have to go and do anything there. Once we make land available, those that are responsible must take over and do what. The only thing that is important is communication. So you don't go and buy land without any plan. So it means by the time the land is acquired, all other things must already have been put in place, so that that land does not remain idle. It must be used for the purpose that it's supposed to be used for. So that even talks to issues whether you need to buy more land for communal areas. Obviously, there must be engagement. You want to buy more land for township development or any other thing. There has to be an engagement so that we can do what we can do and stop there and others take over. Member Mohaka, you talked about issues of breakdown with respect to land ownership. I just thought I should just clarify this so that our engagement, even in future, take note of what I'll say. One is that indeed there was an audit that was done in 2017. And that audit, before I talk, I'd give just synopsis of what it says. That audit has got limitations. And the limitation is part of what you have said, and I'll just bring it so that it completes what you have said. The limitation is that it was covering land owned by individuals. And that land only constitutes 39% of the total land in our country. We're talking about 122 million hectares. So it did not cover land owned by companies, entities, land owned by trusts. So you can see that 60% of the land has not been included in that. But I guess what I'm saying is that it is available, but if we use that just to reflect as a snapshot, to use what is happening on land that's owned by individual, I think it says about 72% is still land that is owned by white people. So, and 4% is the land that is owned by black people. In terms of, with that caveat, that it's not the total land. My worry is, if you unpack what is in the companies, I'm not sure whether it will get better or it will get worse. Let me not predict. Your guess is as good as mine. But something's gonna go either way. I don't think that those statistics will remain like that. They'll go either way, either better or even worse. And that include also the issue of land owned by foreigners. And I'm not sure that the word foreigners is correct, but it's correct. Foreign nationals, yes. Is the same apply? We don't know in this country how much land is owned by foreign national. Yeah. But these are efforts. There are efforts. It may be early now to talk about them, to try to address that. There has been an effort also from the deed side. There also effort coming from the state to try to, because this matter has to be addressed. I'll tell you why it is important, members. When you talk about equitable access to land, it means you must know the current status so that you can be able to define what constitutes equitable. Because it's almost like a mathematical function. So if you don't know, you don't have all these variables, you will not know how far you are going in terms of your addressing equitable access to land. So I think that is the challenge that I must live with you, but it's a challenge that we need to confront in order to address that going forward. I think that takes me. I think those are the issues that I wanted to address. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Honorable Chair, and thanks to my colleagues for the responses that have been given to date. I should say most of the areas that I was supposed to respond to have been covered. They lay base in terms of how we respond to the issues going forward. But I would like to depart from this one, Chair. There are two basic principles that I think broadly we might need to address that are country issues. The first one is around what was highlighted around uncompetitive behavior in terms of the land reform space. And maybe at the base, we should be also aware of laws that are against uncompetitive behavior and the institutions that would assist us if we have got that problem, that if this arise, assist us in terms of then presenting them to the Competitions Commission to look at issues that have been raised so that it does not become an allegation, but it becomes tested and it can be proven, if any. Otherwise, it raises tensions within the space that we occupy. The second one was around the prevention and combating of corrupt activities. And Honorable Mokgaka, I think, was on this matter. And it's quite well and good in terms of engagements to relate in terms of those who are corrupt, maybe even within the Department of Agriculture, Land Reform and Rural Development. But it is also important that in terms of that act, if there is a corrupt activity that is known, it must be reported, because it equally makes a person who does not report it to be equally liable in terms of the act. So maybe from where I'm sitting, that's where we need to deal with this, because we are attempting to get a corrupt-free environment in terms of the department. And if other matters are not being reported accordingly, then we allow for these instances to fester and also in the process dirty and have a collateral damage in terms of the department and a collateral damage in terms of the country generally. So that's something that I thought we should also relate to, that where there are activities that are known, corrupted by members of the Department of Agriculture, Land Reform and Rural Development, we would really appreciate that this be reported so that we can be able to deal with those with the legal parameters. From our side, we pine to have a department that is corruption-free, that is fraud-free, And there are cases that are currently in the law enforcement areas that have been reported by the department in line with the framework that is there. So any other area that comes to the fore from the department side, we report it to the police so that it can be advanced. And as I had indicated in the previous engagements with this committee, we have got quite a lot of areas that we have reported to the police that we can really share with you to show you that the cases that are currently in the law enforcement area from a department side. But equally true, they are hardworking men and women in this department in terms of the areas that we have highlighted. It is important maybe, Honorable Chair, to highlight the importance of the agricultural land holding trading entity and how it came about. I think Memokono has been able to indicate that because it's an act of parliament, the work that he has got to do will then follow the Department of Land Reform and Rural Development. However, it would be remiss of us if we commit the very same mistakes that history had committed in the past in terms of the area of focus of the work, because that is maybe where the genesis of most of the problems that we are having are. Mr. Ndove was highlighting something that was very important. Agriculture in its design, and I'm not saying this because I come from the field in terms of my training, in its design, from a constitutional point of view, it's a concurrent function. Once that concurrency is being meddled with, then you have got an issue around your design. I usually say that it's a design error, and it shows in terms of the work that we have had, and we have got history to prove that. If we go to recap, the report that came from National Treasury indicated from its inception in terms of 2010 until it was stopped, that it actually was designed to do agricultural work. And it then says that you have got two departments that are doing the same work. And it will lead to quite a lot of issues that we cannot deal with, which is what I want to respond to Honorable Mahlatsi on the areas that we have identified that should be left with the Department of Land and Rural Development. And I usually say I would not discuss the issues around administration and the national macro-organization of government, but I will discuss the principle. The principle says that form will always follow the function that you have. Now, in terms of the form that we have, it's informed by function. If the function that is being done is agriculture function, then without any doubt it has got to go to agriculture, so that we don't taint the process in terms of being too intrusive in terms of what needs to be done. So if it says that a person, the weight in terms of the work that they are doing, it's 90% agriculture, then that function would go to agriculture. And we can have discussions in terms of that after that has been determined, because otherwise we are meddling in terms of how we deal with a strategy, which says that your form will always follow the function that you have. And you would be happy, Honorable Mahlatsi, that in terms of plus will remain with the Department of Land Reform and Rural Development. However, there are areas that we would need to tweak. There's an element that you also raised, Honorable Mahlatsi, that was very important, and I think it was also raised by Honorable Mthethwa to a greater extent, around what Plus will do going forward, because it looks like it's an entity that still needs some work, that needs to be ALHA, that needs to be assisted. And I think from where we are, there's work that is being done within the department. Members would recall the Land and Agrarian Reform Agency, that those discussions are not off the ground. That would include the whole package that ALHA happens to be at. Now, a few quick areas of emphasis, I think, that I need to touch base on. Whether in its current form and state, ALHA is sustainable. Any person who would argue differently, I think, would give facts. But my understanding is that the property management spending, whenever that the intersections just go up in terms of property management spending, and the one that you spend in terms of land acquisition goes down, then you have got a problem. Because that intersection should not happen, it should happen the other way around, and therefore we need to rebalance how we do things. But what led to this? And Member Kono has been able to articulate the matters, but we should also indicate that there were also decisions that were taken to say those who are leasing land should not be paying, and it was set at the very highest level. So you have got to deal again with that area to say that, but we cannot be dealing with a problem that is $750 million in terms of property management and not be paying, because ultimately you create a burden in terms of the state to be able to assist the farmers going forward. I think, Chair, it's very important, and Honorable, I think Honorable Madlala, in terms of the questions that he has asked, was asking about a way of then creating an avenue where we can have graduates working on the other areas of importance, and I think Mr. Shilote has responded to that. And then Honorable Muthetwa also asked the very same question to say, what is the possibility in terms of us also assisting ALHA with graduates to deal with certain of these farms that we are having. We are having a meeting with the leadership of those who are responsible for the AAPs. There are options that we have got to consider. The problem about unemployment of graduates within the sector is actually broader than what we are currently seeing. It's quite deep in terms of where we are. And we will consider broadly what are the options that we have, including the land that we have, so that we can be able to deal with it. Where the issues come to head, I think it would be remiss of me if I say maybe the problem that we have with our farmers, it's about knowledge. It might not only be knowledge, it's also about the resourcing, because most of them, if you have got to have a production cycle that is a year, 3 months, it needs money, and you need to have that money coming into the business quite a lot of, in a predictable and consistent manner. And if you don't have, the business will then collapse. So there are a plethora of issues in terms of farmer support that we need to address to deal with those areas. I think, Chair, from where I'm sitting and having listened to the responses from the colleagues, you were the one who then wrapped it up to say, is this a sustainable business model that we are having? And I'm saying it might not be sustainable. There are now interventions that we are having as the state to deal with the issue of ALHA and how it relates to the other institutions that are there. That would conclude from our side, Honorable Chair, Honorable Members, the responses that we have had. We have taken note of Honorable Madlala's request for information separate to additional to our responses, and we will do the same. We will also, Honorable Chair, and I noted what Mr. Shilote was saying, we will also provide the different stages where these issues around conveyancing are, because there is a sequence. So we will say X are at this number, so many at a particular number, so that the value chain can be assessed and members can know how far we are progressing. Thank you very much, Honorable Chair.
Well, thank you, DG. Honorable members, we are hard up for time now. In fact, it's over. It's 1 o'clock now. I know that there was some indication that we would actually get an opportunity to make follow-up questions, but now time is really up. I actually would just request that perhaps at some stage we do get the Alpha Farm Assessment Report. because you did allude to that. And secondly, you also made reference to possible corruption, which the DG has actually also elaborated on. But as far as I can remember, is that in the past, there have been some SIU investigations. Perhaps if we could get some information around that, at what stage of, where are they? We might even want to invite them as well to come here and actually give us a feedback on that. Yeah, I think the DG has covered me on the issue of, to some extent, on the issue of, priorities, because I was wondering why the department has in the past taken 25% of the land acquisition fund and actually funded recap, because where I'm seated, recap is more agriculture than land reform. So, but the DG has actually, clarified that to some extent. So that I am not chased away when I approached heaven on my departure from earth, I will make sure that I provide 2 minutes for follow-up, so that each member that wants to make a follow-up divide amongst themselves the 2 minutes.
I'm not going to say a lot because honestly, I'm not happy with the way my questions were answered. I think we will need, well, personally, I'll make a follow-up questions, written questions. But the last point I want to make is that it will help us as the department is preparing to divorce from agriculture. We need to understand what is the strategic thinking of this department going forward, so that we can really align ourselves to that strategic thinking. The mandate, for example, as well, that this department sees itself taking, because I think that will help us. Maybe DG, the issue of where the land should sit, you can raise it at your FOSAT meeting, because it's an anomaly. You have Department of Land, but land sits with Public Works, which is the custodian of properties. So in a nutshell, I'm saying, going forward, Chair, maybe we will need just to understand what is the thinking going forward in preparation for the divorce, because there are so many things. Maybe we should consider the time in future, but there are so many things that I would have loved to say as a follow-up, but in the interest of time, because I can see the members want to leave, I'll stop here.
In relation to the matter that you have just raised, honorable members will remember that at some stage we did actually ask almost a similar question to the minister. And his response was that we should just be patient until he comes back from their own strategic planning meeting. Yeah, we are almost over what is this the last quarter? So there is still no indication when they will actually have the strategic planning session of the department. But I think having a joint meeting with the department, with the Portfolio Committee on Agriculture, so that we can jointly discuss the broad principles and broad, issues concerning the reconfiguration of these two departments would also help. so that it does not actually become an issue for the DG and his administration or the minister alone, and then we are left out. When when everything else has been done, then we begin to, identify some loopholes. I think we should actually strive to be part of the process of the reconfiguration of these departments. Honorable,
Yeah, no, I'll take all the minutes of the remaining members because but they're waiting for us to finish. So, thanks, Chair. No, Chair. Six comments, just short comments, Chair. Maybe it's provision for next meeting. We did agree about the straight plan for this year. We said we're going to prioritize our straight plan this year so that legacy report is presented formally so that we're able to deal with all what is contained in that report. I think let's make a follow-up on that one. I'm worried, Chair, about the comments or the response from the DDG. Correctly so. Because it meant that even during the drafting of the white paper, not all information was available in front of those who were dealing with this particular matter. If by now we don't know how much land is owned by who in the country, then it means there's a big gap. There's a big gap. And it's a worrying factor, Chair, because that is why I'm insisting on this question of ownership and control. I'm insisting on that because it must be informed by the profiling of the land as a whole in the country. I wanted to ask the next question as we're custodian of the land, how much land contains minerals in the country? It's another big question. I know that debate will say it belongs to the mineral. No, it belongs here. How much land? We visited Ingonyama Trust. We're informed there that Ingonyama Trust has got some mines, this and that and that. But it's not about Ingonyama Trust, about how much land in the country that contains or produces minerals, even before you take that function to a mineral. So I was going to ask that question, Chair. But my proposal, Chair, is that let's fast track the strat plan because there was a proposal that I made in one of these portfolio committees around another option, because this option of buying 72% of the farms from white farmers is going to take us 100 years if government will have money to buy, because it's clear now that we must buy the land. But there was that option, Chair. But I want us to consider that option when we're dealing with the strat plan, our strat plan as far as that is concerned. By worry, Chair, that the Department of Minister, when it comes in front of us, must come with a report that has profiled the land of that the country has. Kulwa ngomhlaba ngoku, kulwa nge-territory ngoku. Today's wars. Asoyazi nomhlaba othi obuwe apha eSwaziland nobuwe eLesotho every day. Asoyazi loo nto if asiwazi umhlaba esinawo. And therefore makeze uminister ephethe ireport ethi nangu umhlaba uMzantsi Afrika onawo, whether occupied or unoccupied, but nangu umhlaba esinawo. And therefore on the basis of that we're able to decide on the interventions that we do. Secondly, the breakdown, the breakdown according to the race, not out of 39%, out of 100%. Because currently it's 72% of 39%, not of 39%, 100%, out of 100% of the land that we possess as a country. I thought that the minister must have that task. That task. Angasixelela ngezi plan kakhulu. Mabaplan bagqibe bangaplan okokoko. Thanks, Chair.
thank you, Honorable Member. kusekhona inyambo sokuncane okusalile.
I wanted to say, Chair, in economics, land is a factor of production. Therefore, the Land Affairs Department need to, when they come here, they need to bring the economic component of how land is being used for economic purpose, because we are sitting with this problem. You are afraid to say it. Whether it is held in companies or trust, you can still classify it racially, it still belongs to the same race. Therefore, it doesn't make a difference. I am sitting with 92% Africans, 8% white people. That's it. And then I can tell you now that 92% of the economy is sitting on two individuals in this country. Not even you as government controls that economy. So this notion of saying government must grow the economy, you will never grow something that you don't own. Somebody else owns the economy. Therefore, which means the land is also owned by the one who controls the economy. And in this case, it's individual white. Thank you.
Well, on that note, I think I should actually express on behalf of this committee, our appreciation to the Director General and the team for your contributions and your presentations. Members have actually made their feelings known. I'm sure they will be taken on board when we meet next in this meeting. The issue of land will always be like this. I mean, I had just attended a conference somewhere, and I learned that, in fact, Mauritius is owned by 5 families. 5. The entire Mauritius is owned by 5 families. So it's it's a never-ending problem. Thank you so much. The meeting is adjourned. Honorable, oh, no, I can still stop. Sorry, Honorable Posov. May I withdraw the adjournment of the meeting to consider the minutes. The Director General and his team are free to actually leave the meeting. I'm so sorry, honorable members. It's part of actually having flu, you know, that you lose concentration sometimes. The minutes, well, the minutes were circulated to honorable members. So if there are any corrections, our members will indicate by show of hands. And if there are no corrections, then I would actually recognize a hand that would propose the adoption of those minutes. Minutes are of the 5th of March and also of the 12th of March. Let us start off with the minutes of the 5th. Honorable Ndala.
I move for the adoption of the minutes of the 5th March 2025.
Any seconder? Thank you, Honorable Adams. The minutes of the 12th. Yeah, Honorable Matikizela. Who is the seconder? Honorable Ndalani. Oh, Honorable Adams, thank you. Well, the meeting is now actually properly adjourned. I promise you I will not call you back. That announcement is not there today. Yeah.